Hello everyone. I'm glad to see you on my channel. The story I'm going to tell you today is pure. It is true that all the bad things that happen in life happen for a reason. It is said that we can appreciate the good things, the things when they happen to us. I hope you enjoy this story. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience.
I'm the boss now, and it's up to me to decide who to appoint to positions. Emily looked angrily at the clinic's head doctor. But you don't know anything about this. You'll ruin the whole business, the man gritted his teeth angrily. Father thought I could handle it, she replied. And your opinion is secondary here. Speak it to someone else. Ever since she was a little girl, Emily had known Daddy was not to be disturbed. He has an important and complicated job. John Smith, a gifted surgeon, was the star of his course and was rapidly advancing in his career. One of the first in the region, he opened his own private clinic and then divorced Emily's mom. An ordinary kindergarten teacher, she no longer fit his status. Instead, girls of a certain kind, with long legs, plump lips, and luxurious hair, appeared next to her father. Of course, Emily's mother, Sarah, hard to survive the divorce. She forbade her daughter to communicate with her father. They saw each other rarely secretly. She didn't want to offend her mom. Emily, however, was also hurting from her dad leaving the family. At their school, the best in their town, it was not customary to be different from others. Most of her classmates were brought in expensive cars, and Emily walked to school in the rain and snow. Also, her father, though he paid child support, officially withdrew the money. Mom reluctantly saved her daughters for a better life. They lived on a teacher's salary while their peers wore fancy sweaters and bought gum in different flavors. Emily wore a trademark scratchy brown dress with a white collar. Her mom explained to her the main thing is what a person has inside in the soul, in the head, and the outside is superfluous, like beauty. Today you have it, tomorrow you don't. But I want to be beautiful now. Like everyone else, Emily pleaded. My classmates laugh, they tease me as an old maid. Mom, I'm the only one who wears a braid and a dress. Remember, not everything in this world is measured by the amount of money. Your classmates are all blousy figures with daddy's money. And look deeper, they're insecure teenagers. Emily tried to ignore the taunts. But it wasn't easy. She remembered her high school years with a shudder for a long time to come. She never went to homecoming, studied after the 9th grade in the pedagogical school, and then went by the example of her mother teacher in a kindergarten. Emily kids just adored. She had a clear talent to listen and understand everyone. But everything in her life changed in an instant. She was 27 when her daddy died. He died on vacation, crashed in a helicopter on a fishing trip. He'd been seriously ill for a year before that. Almost retired from his business, went on vacation to celebrate his recovery. But it turned out differently. The relatives received the remains in a closed coffin. Emily and her mom took care of the funeral. The father never remarried. His daughter was the sole heir to everything: an apartment, bank accounts, and a private clinic. After the funeral, Emily took care of the inheritance. She was invited to her notary, Michael, who was in charge of her father's affairs, told about all the property that passed to the young woman, and then added, I was not only an attorney, but a friend of your father, Emily. And I want to tell you, he was especially worried about the clinic. Of course, my friend hoped his daughter would carry on his business, not pass it on to anyone else. But I don't know anything about it, Emily sighed. The business would die much faster under my management than it would thrive. Well, the most I can manage is a staff of toddlers. Believe me, doctors aren't much different from them, the notary laughed. And then, the clinic isn't specialized. There's a head doctor there, you'll get used to it, you'll figure it out, you'll calmly deal with administrative issues. Of course, your father dreamed that his daughter will connect her life with medicine. But with your choice, he accepted. So consider this will a kind of blessing from him, a loan of trust from Dad. I'm, really scared, Emily admitted. But I guess I'll have to try it. I warn you, I don't know anything about documents either. After the visit to the notary, Emily drove to her father's apartment, which she was getting. She didn't feel it was hers yet. In the evening, she met with her fiancé, Tom. After learning of the inheritance, the latter had become more attentive to her, although the young people had dated for a couple of years before, and Tom had even insisted on marrying her. "Emily, how have you been to the notary?" Tom asked his beloved. "Yeah, starting on the inheritance. God, I still can't believe Daddy's gone. Maybe there's some terrible mistake. What if he's alive?" "But you did a DNA test for identification. There can't be a mistake." "What about the inheritance?" Tom inquired. "The notary is particularly insistent that I should take over the clinic," Emily complained. "But I so don't want to do that. It's not like I'm Dad, I don't know anything about medicine at all. He was the one who was a genius, operated flawlessly." "It's all right, you'll figure it out," Tom replied. "But the money will flow. Imagine what a private clinic brings in. There's a lot of money going around." "Oh, do you know what the responsibility is?" "Tom, I remember when Dad was always complaining about problems. He used to talk a lot about how difficult it was to manage a big team. You know what he used to call his doctors? A ball of snakes. And he said the emblem of medicine wasn't chosen by accident." "You what? Do you really want to give it all up? And then who would inherit my father's business and estate?" "No, really. I can't let Dad down. I'm just a little afraid of the huge responsibility," Emily sighed. "I mean, it's an established team of adults and I'm coming in to manage them. It's not going to be easy to handle, and it's going to be hard to put myself in charge." "It's okay. I'll be there for you," Tom comforted her. "I'll always be there to help, to support." "Thank you," the bride smiled. "I know I can count on you." A month later, Emily already had all the title transfer papers in hand. She hadn't even dared to go into the clinic without them, and now she calmly came in and claimed her rights. The girl at the receptionist's desk stared at her fearfully when Emily demanded the keys to her father's office. "I can't give them to you." "Hold on, I'll get the head doctor." "What do you mean you can't?" "I own this clinic and I'm your direct supervisor," Emily said angrily. "You're not supposed to anyway," the girl squeaked and blushed. "I'll get my supervisor right away, you can take it up with him." She ran off down the corridor and returned, accompanied by a large, scowling man. He looked displeased, as if Emily had torn this important man away from something equally important. "What do we have here? Who are you, girl, anyway? Are you scaring the staff at me? I can actually call the police right now, security. Leave the premises immediately." "Allow me to introduce myself. Smith Emily, owner of this clinic." On what grounds the head doctor was outraged. "We weren't warned. In fact, let me see some ID." "What are you guys doing, holding seances?" Emily grinned. "How else could we have gotten a warning? My dad's dead. He can't exactly tell you anything anymore." "Your jokes are stupid." Just like John, the head doctor grumbled. looking at the paperwork. It's all in the father, I can tell the daughter. Well, come on, I'll show you around. You won't be coming here much, will you? On the contrary, I'll be here every day. That was Papa's will. Emily smiled. By the way, you haven't introduced yourself. Ben, the head doctor, muttered. I can't say I'm very pleased, but the clinic can't operate for long without a leader either. By the way, now that you've shown up here, sign our payrolls and estimates for next month's medications. We're almost out of stock, and people are working for you, dear clinic owner. For the second month without a paycheck. Emily nodded. She got the keys to the office, went inside, and turned on the computer. They shared the same password and login, the kind of joke game that had united father and daughter for years. Then she invited the secretary and accountant to her office. With them were solved the main organizational issues, signed papers, long awaited their turn. Her father's secretary, the sweetest Deborah, kept sighing and talking about Emily's resemblance to her father. It irritated the young woman a little, but she tolerated it. Deborah was very much appreciated by her father for her organizational skills. The accountant left. Emily immersed herself in scheduling. Together with the secretary, it was decided to convene a council with the department heads before evening. Outside the office doors, all day Emily heard a joyful buzz. The employees began to receive their paychecks, delayed because of the owner's departure. Everyone was revitalized, walking around in high spirits. And in the evening at the meeting of the new owner was presented a report. It showed that the clinic was doing just fine, but it didn't match the data that my father had in his computer. The chief physician added fuel to the fire. I think I would be expressing a general opinion if I said that you don't have to run the clinic yourself. This month has shown that we are doing quite well, and if you trust me to run it, you won't regret it. You know, Ben, Emily replied, I appreciate your willingness to cooperate, but I'll be running the clinic myself. It's what Dad wanted, and his last wishes must be honored. But you're a medical nut, the chief medical officer said indignantly. What kind of leader are you? Ruin the clinic, that's all. I dare say, Ben. Emily replied, you're also a doctor, not a manager. And my purview is not your purview at all. If you don't like something, please report to my office. By the way, the clinic will be fully audited this year. I'm warning everyone right away, so there won't be any surprises. I need to know. As the new owner, what a cat in a bag I got. Everyone left. Only the on-duty shift remained in the clinic, and Emily walked the corridors for a while, peering into the rooms. In one of the back rooms, she suddenly found a young girl setting up a cot. She was startled by Emily's appearance. Are you going to sleep here? Marveled the clinic owner. What do you mean? I'm sorry, treated the girl, almost crying. My name is Kelly. I work here as a nurse. You see, the landlady kicked me out with my stuff, and there was no paycheck. And without money, there's nowhere to go. I'm from out of town. I was working here at the state hospital, and then Ben called me. I was a paid nurse in his ward. And you have a medical background, clarified Emily. Yes, it's all about personnel. There's a copy of my diploma. You don't think I'm just really sleeping here because there's nowhere else? Ours laugh, of course. Well, I'm used to it. I've never been considered a human being. The daughter of alcoholics. What good is that? They may be small-minded, but I'm honest and efficient. Kelly, how do you think things are going at the clinic? Asked Emily unexpectedly, as someone on the inside of the situation. You know, it's not my first day here, and things aren't great, to be honest, Kelly admitted. There's a shortage of medications, the equipment is aging, the CT scanner should have been repaired a long time ago, or better yet, scrapped. Doctors don't stick around. Well, except for the sane, ready to gnaw on any occasion to organize. And the good ones are quickly left behind. Stats are attributed, they cover up mistakes. That's what they do in any hospital. But here, it's just like that. Wow. I got such a rosy picture of everything. Emily smiled. I suspected it wasn't all, and my dad told me about it, shared it. But for it to be this bad, I'm surprised. Okay, Kelly, good night. See you later. Wait, there's one more thing I wanted to tell you. The nurse stopped her. We had a guy admitted yesterday. They found him in the yard by the garbage cans, all beat up, dressed like a homeless guy. Not transportable, of course, which is the only reason he's still here. Otherwise, he'd have been turned over to free medical care a long time ago. There's no one to pay for a guy like that. In fact, your daddy had a social ward here since the clinic was founded. They took in just such patients for charity, and now no one wants to take him on, and we don't know who's going to pay for it. Roger that, Emily replied. I'll be sure to deal with it tomorrow. Don't worry about it. The next day, Emily went to quit her job at the daycare center. The first day, it became clear that her father's clinic would take up almost all of her time. After writing her notice, she went to say goodbye to her little ones in the group. They were literally crying and clinging to their favorite teacher. Emily promised them that she would definitely come to visit. With a heavy heart, she left the kindergarten, where she had worked for the past few years, and went to the clinic. There, Emily happened to witness one unpleasant scene. Several nurses stood and taunted Kelly, and she didn't respond, huddled in a corner. What do you think? You're going to live here unhindered? We'll tell the management in no time. You're the smart one. Homeless people are no better than the ones we found by the dumpsters yesterday. You stink, you stink. You feel that, girls? I'm not homeless, Kelly almost cried. So what? You're on duty for us tonight? On the night shift? You're sleeping anyway. At least you'll be useful. And don't you dare complain to the head doctor. What's going on here? Emily stepped toward them. The women scrambled away. Only Kelly stood back. You'll find it. Let's go have some coffee with you in the morning. The rest of you, get to work. Just give me your last name so I know who to reprimand. Were we going to work? The nurses answered her. And if you're talking about Kelly, we're just joking around in the office. That's what we do to lighten the mood. I can see that. You heard her again. You're out. And under such an article that they won't take you anywhere else, Emily threatened. She lives here with my personal permission and will take the shower if she needs to, whenever she wants to. Oh, you shouldn't do that, Kelly told her quietly as the nurses left. They're definitely going to hound me now. I don't think so, Emily grinned. They'll be more like friends. But don't get your hopes up. You know this is a temporary situation. They went to her office, had a cup of coffee and some cakes Emily had bought on the way in. Then Kelly went to work, and word of her friendship with her new boss spread quickly through the floors. Emily demanded to see the head doctor and the department heads. When everyone was assembled, she asked sternly, I take it everyone here has long since forgotten their oath of office. What are you talking about? Emily, the head doctor, replied through gritted teeth. You don't use words like that. Then how do you understand your behavior unworthy of the title of doctor? Ben, a patient with a complex of problems, is lying in the department for the third day, and no one's even going to treat him. Do we wait until he's dead and we get sued for not treating him? Come on. It's a homeless guy, the head doctor grinned. Who cares about him? Like me, Emily replied angrily, looking at him. What's your treatment plan? Oh, come on. Like you know anything about it, Ben continued to push his line. It's not going to die today, it's going to die tomorrow. There's a whole host of problems. Then do something about it, instead of making up stuff. In general, Ben, I'm very unhappy with you, Emily declared. Of course, while Dad was sick, everyone here relaxed. And then he died. And you can do anything you want. I'm warning you right away, it won't happen again. There's a consult at the patient's bedside in an hour. And don't tell me there's no way to save him. If this man dies, your careers and reputations will die too. I've said it all. What a bitch, just like her father, someone in the crowd hissed. But no one dared to argue. Leaving her office, Ben looked at the young woman with hatred. Who the hell was she? Just another upstart, the daughter of a rich daddy. And he, an honored doctor, should be jumping on his hind legs in front of her. Of course, her father's been ripped off. A lot. By all kinds of people. Ben himself had long had a big, successful business reselling drugs from the clinic. But now it seemed that source of easy money was coming to an end. An hour later, there was indeed a meeting at the patient's bedside. Almost all the doctors thought he was hopeless. It was necessary to appoint someone who would be responsible in case of a bad outcome. The choice fell on a young doctor named Kevin, a recent medical school graduate. You're the man for the job, said the head doctor. Prove you're worth something, or you're just taking up space on the staff. Yes, you get the money, but I'm afraid of hurting you, Kevin warned. You know? I mean, there's no room on him. Don't worry, colleague, I've got your back, replied Ben, who wasn't really looking to protect anyone. He just needed a convenient scapegoat. Kevin stayed in the room. He continued to examine the patient, made his appointments and dictated them to Kelly, asking her to pay special attention to the patient, even though she spent all her free time in the unnamed guy's room. There were no papers on him, and he wasn't conscious. Doctor, is he going to be okay? The mother asked. He's so young. I feel so sorry for the boy. I don't know. The beatings are bad. But we'll fight for him, Kevin replied optimistically. Keep an eye on the kid. Report any changes in his condition to me. If there's a chance, there's not much time. Within 24 hours, Jack, our unnamed one, will regain consciousness or die. By late afternoon, driving home, Emily realized how tired she was. Running the clinic took a lot of energy and left little time for a personal life, or even a semblance of one. At home, her fiancé Tom was waiting for her. Well, you're not taking care of yourself at all, he reprimanded her. I understand it's a new case, but you've got to manage your time. Tom, let's not lecture. I'm so tired, Emily begged her lover. Is there something you wanted? Of course, to see you. I miss you, Tom replied. And actually, let's get married. In official status, I'll be able to help you at the clinic. Oh, don't start, okay, Emily begged him. I'll do without outside help. It's my business. Daddy wanted his daughter to be the one to continue it. And for you, the clinic is just a huge, profitable business. That's not how it works. It's more complicated than that. All right, I'll stay out of it. What's stopping us from just getting married? Tom, please. I'm fine right now. I'm so tired, Emily pleaded. Just give me a chance to recover. The annoyed groom left, and Sarah began feeding her daughter and asking about how the day had gone. In between, she asked a question. "What? Is he asking you to get married again?" "Yes. I'm tired of explaining to him that it's not the right time," Emily sighed. "And he keeps insisting." "Take your time, daughter. That Tom is so slippery. I've never liked him. And now that you're a bride with money, you have to be even more careful. Who knows what the groom's plans are?" "Mom, calm down. I'm in no hurry as it is," Sarah assured her daughter. "That's it. I'm going to bed." Emily arrived at the clinic early in the morning, but didn't find Kelly in her cubbyhole. The emergency room said the girl was on duty at the bedside of an unnamed patient with the doctor. Emily went to the room. "So how are we doing here today?" she asked cheerfully. "Is there any hope, or are we giving up?" "There's definitely one." "Kelly's a wizard," the young doctor smiled at her. "I'm going to have to ask you to write her a bonus. As it is, we're still a long way from an optimistic prognosis. But we've stabilized the patient. We'll keep treating her." "That's good. Yesterday at the meeting they were telling me he was hopeless." "Your name is Kevin, right?" "Yes, that's right. Report to me personally on the patient's condition on a daily basis. And you, Kelly, are under my personal orders to be assigned to this ward for the time being. Don't get distracted by the routine. There's someone in the clinic to take care of it." Kelly nodded in response, and Emily walked further into the office. A new day had begun with its surprises. 24 hours later, the very hopeless nameless came to his senses, opening his eyes. Kelly immediately rushed to call the doctor and Emily. They came in, assessed the guy's condition. He was clearly on the mend, though he couldn't speak clearly. "You're doing great," Kevin. Emily smiled. "It was easy to handle such a task. Would you like to take over the department? I need reliable, trustworthy people." "I don't even have much experience," he said, embarrassed. "And then what will the others say?" "We'll figure it out," Emily smiled. "Wait, there will be an official appointment within a day." Leaving Kevin and Kelly to deal with the patients, she went to her office and called the chief physician. He came in and immediately recognized the change in personnel. "Well, let's start cleaning up our ranks," Emily told him with a smile. "Here, Kevin is appointed head of the Department of Traumatology and Surgery." "Are you crazy, Emily?" The head doctor snapped at her. "He's been out of school for a week." "What department? We have doctors with 20 years of service on the rank and file." "And you, too, if you don't understand words," Emily grinned. "You want to confront me? You better find another job." "Come on, what don't I understand?" Ben backed down. "But you should know that I'm not going to cover other people's medical mistakes. Let your child prodigy deal with them on his own." Emily nodded. At the same time, Tom burst into the office, ignoring the intruders. He kissed his bride and said, But we're not being led at all. I'm ready to work at your clinic. I'm ready to work at your clinic. I'm ready to work at anything, just to be close to you." "Tom, you're just a driver," she smiled. "Let's ask the head doctor. Do we need someone for this position?" "Ben, a second field driver will not hurt," answered the chief physician. "The staff can't cope. We often do home examinations after discharge and send medicines to patients as prescribed." "Well then, so we'll do it that way." "You'll be a driver for a while, Emily said. "Go ahead and book it. I'll let HR know." "I'll walk you out," Ben said. I hope you don't make him superintendent." "You're kidding," Emily laughed. "No, don't worry. It's all clear from the start. By the way, I'd like you to meet my fiancée." Ben nodded and walked out of the office with Tom. He recognized this man as a young man looking for profit and began to seduce him with possible benefits. After waiting for Tom to complete the paperwork, Ben took him up on it. "Look, I see you're a man of business and intelligence." The chief physician began the conversation. "Well, yes," Tom confirmed, "I am." "Well, I have a business proposal. Of course, we won't talk about it much, but you will have a chance to earn good money quickly and almost safely." "I'll take it. What should I do?" Tom answered at once. They discussed for some time what he was going to do. Then they parted, exchanging phone numbers. The head doctor assured that his fiancée would never find out. Meanwhile, the nameless drifter had a name. He had recovered enough to speak, and at this very moment he was answering his attending's questions. Kelly ran to call Emily. The situation demanded her presence. The new mistress entered the room and heard. "My name is Adam Norton. Listen, call your father." I dictated the phone number. "He must be going crazy tonight. What's the date, anyway?" "Okay, Adam, we'll be sure to call," Kevin assured the patient. "Why don't you tell us how you ended up on the street?" "It's kind of complicated," he tried to smile with dry, cracked lips. "You see, my father is very rich. Steve Norton, I'm sure you've heard of him. Well, he's been paranoid lately. He's been yelling about me disgracing his family name. And I can't last a day without money. So we had a bet. I had to prove to my dad that I could do it. Survive without money. You know, like a test or something. We agreed on a month." "You rich people have funny quirks," Kevin said. "How did you end up on the street?" "That's what I'm getting at," Adam said. "You see, it turned out that at some point I became my own man among the vagrants, relaxed, let my guard down, said something wrong. Anyway, they attacked me in a crowd and almost killed me. Violence is more the norm among them, so it was expected, but I was sure I was in control of the situation." "Sounds like you've been playing a little too hard to get." Adam Norton Kevin chuckled. "Now I'll have to get new teeth, and probably have to have my septum repaired too. It's been a life or death situation." Emily went to call Adam's father, who still believed his son was still going through his ordeal. Upon hearing that his son was in the hospital, Steve immediately rushed over. "Thank you so much. Not every clinic owner is capable of such mercy." After all, Adam made a decidedly repulsive impression in his character as a homeless man, the boy's father thanked Emily. "Well, I wasn't always wealthy either, so I view all patients as equal in status. How did you even allow this to happen? I mean, it's native blood. He could have easily died on the street," she scolded her father. "Yes, I realize that now. And in general, you know, it was uneasy in my heart these days. The old fool decided to organize an inspection, and we should have just talked." "Well, you'll have time to mend relations," Emily smiled. "And I also want to ask you to be nice to Nurse Kelly. She did a lot to save Adam, literally never left his bedside. Do I understand you?" Of course, Steve smiled. "No offense to a good professional. And to you, Emily, I'm very grateful. Any complications arise, feel free to contact me. You understand, rumors spread quickly. I haven't met your father personally, but I've heard a lot, and I can already see that my daughter is a worthy heiress." They said goodbye, and Emily escorted Steve to her son's room. Upon learning that their homeless man was a rich man disguised as a vagrant, the entire clinic came running to see him. The doctors were ready to literally fight for the right to observe him, but Kevin and Kelly held their ground. Emily pulled the young doctor aside. "Kevin, you do realize what's going on, don't you?" she smiled. "Now everyone is going to be here giving you advice and trying to gain your trust. Please remain loyal to me. I know how to remember the good." "Of course. Come now, Emily. I have little sympathy for this tangle of schemers on the whole. You, on the other hand, are the opposite." "Well, good," Emily stated. "Come by the office anytime. I'm ready to discuss any controversial or questionable issues in person. The main thing, Kevin, is to stand your ground. Don't let anyone change your assignments or anything like that." "Right, of course," the young doctor smiled. Emily walked back to her room and smiled. She liked Kevin, a good-looking guy. A young woman who wanted some attention too, but there was no time to think about romance at work. The situation at the clinic wasn't the easiest as it was. Slowly sorting out the supply of medicines and other administrative moments, Emily realized that there were just huge leaks in the budget of the clinic. And they appeared just in the same year when her father was ill, and she had to deal with it. In the meantime, the head doctor gradually drew the naive and stupid, but very greedy Tom deeper into his scams. He felt the taste of easy money and literally asked to participate in more and more dubious cases. And Ben was only glad to have such an accomplice. He'd planned to blame it on Tom if it all came to light. And he wasn't going to wait for an audit. The head doctor had plans of his own. He wanted to quickly change the clinic under the pretext of moving to another city and escape with the stolen goods. But these dreams were prevented from coming true by Kelly, a nurse, who was again habitually ignored by everyone. One day she caught the head doctor and the new driver for the realization of their plans. She was shocked at such brazen theft and had already gone to Emily's office in the morning. It's none of my business, of course, but the meds were just brought in. Ben and that new driver, Tom, are already hauling them out of the warehouse in boxes, Emily. Something has to be done. That's a lot of expensive medicine to account for. Who's going to be responsible for it in the end? They'll just write it off as expired again. Is that what they do in our clinic? Emily wondered. You see, I'm a complete novice at this sort of thing. Are you sure it was the new driver who was there? Well, yes. I saw them with my own eyes and heard the conversation, Kelly confirmed. Do you need proof? That would be nice. After all, words alone aren't going to be enough. And we've just scared off those thieves by checking the warehouse, Emily replied absent-mindedly. So the kids are something I need to think about for the first few minutes. It seemed to Emily that her fiancé was incapable of such treachery. But then she remembered how greedy Tom had been and realized it was just like him. All she had to do was figure out how to nail him. But Kelly helped with that again. A couple days later, she brought in her smartphone footage. The footage showed the head doctor and the driver dragging boxes out of the warehouse under the cover of night. Of course, the camera on the old smartphone wasn't great. But even this quality was enough to make the image quite distinguishable, and the people were easy to identify. That same morning, Emily summoned the couple to her office. Here's the thing, Ben, she began. You've been fired from your position as chief physician of my clinic and head of the plastic surgery department. Why should I be? The man was indignant. I will sue Try, but first you have to pay for all the damage you've done to the clinic over the years. We'll conduct a thorough audit of your activities together with an independent company, uncover all the schemes, including the write-off of usable medicines. And then we'll see where they'll take you with a list of transgressions like that. "You don't want to ruin my career," shouted the chief physician. "Aren't you taking on too much? Don't you get it yet, Ben?" Emily asked tiredly. "My career and reputation are already ruined. Nothing will ever be the same as it was before." "And me?" asked Tom. "What about me and you'll leave as an accessory?" Emily replied indifferently. "Do you really think you can escape punishment? You'd be wrong. By the way, I'm severing our relationship too. You may be free in every way." "But Emily, I wanted to secure our future together and save up for our wedding," the ex-fiancé yelled. "And I already have a great plan." Emily smiled. "Get out of here. Otherwise we'll have to call security." The breakup had hurt her ego. But the hardships of the last month at the clinic had already tempered Emily's character quite well. She went about her usual routine. For the position of chief physician called already retired friend of his father, Uncle Michael. He agreed to help her out by closing the vacancy that had suddenly opened up. Emily breathed a sigh of relief. She went around showing her father's friend his new property. And then Debra reported a visitor waiting outside her office, and there was Steve Norton, Adam's father. "Hello. I think we're on the verge of being discharged," he smiled. "Adam's feeling pretty good already. Might as well get some treatment at home. Too well. That's up to the doctor to decide. Talk to Kevin," Emily suggested. "Adam's a free patient, and extra days in the ward won't cost you anything. That's not what I mean. Is it?" Steve smiled. "Just missing my son. He's the only one I've got left. Wife's dead. No other kids. Well, you'd avoid such dangerous games," then Emily reminded him. "Yeah, I know," Steve answered himself. "Listen, I heard a rumor that the old CT scanner at the clinic is malfunctioning." "Yeah, there's that," Emily sighed. "But you still haven't decided to buy one, have you? Do you have to sort out the costs first?" "I'm willing to donate it to you," Steve smiled. "My company is in the business of supplying high-tech medical equipment." "Wow, that would certainly be great, but we'll manage on our own," Emily replied. "I've seen the prices on CT scanners. It's a lot of space. You saved my son's life." "What's the score?" Steve was indignant. "Don't even argue. You'll have a CT scanner within a month." While Emily was dealing with an unexpected benefactor, the ex-fiancé was plotting revenge. He'd already made some acquaintances at the clinic. He'd even had an affair with one of the nurses, the one who treated Kelly the most. He was angry about the girl's affectionate friendship with the clinic owner and a new rich patient. Emily was very angry. In the evening, she called Tom and began to tell him the news. "Can you believe this upstart managed to get a new CT scanner from a sponsor? It's being paid for by some rich daddy. But how come? Why does she always get lucky out of the blue?" Tom was indignant. "What's that?" "Our Kelly is quietly flirting with this rich son of a bitch, sitting there cooing like lovebirds. The paychecks are trickling in. We're the ones who have to work our asses off, and she just sits around the ward," Tom said unfairly and ended the conversation. A plan for revenge was brewing in his head. His brother worked for a local newspaper and online publication. A reporter had asked him to write an article ostensibly in the interview genre. It told Adam's story on Emily's behalf without names, but with many humiliating details and sordid details. The heroine of the fake interview was identified as the owner of the clinic. Of course, this infuriated Steve Norton. He made a scandal, and then in his heart took back all his promises. The upset father wanted to take Adam home, but the boy resisted it himself. He bonded with Kelly, Kevin, and Emily and believed the heiress's version of the story that she was set up with the article. They believed it without reservation, and Emily herself remembered where Tom's brother worked. Except that wasn't an argument for Steve. You see, it's not the CAT scan that offends me, Emily told her friends that evening, sitting in Adam's room. It's just that it's so easy to lie to anyone, and they can't prove anything. It's really disgusting. The scribblers are really getting naked, Kevin said indignantly. I'd sue that publication. Yeah, I already got the lawyers up. They removed the information from the site. And what's printed on the paper has gone to the people. But Tom, too, if we can prove his involvement in this case, will have to answer for defamation. I'm just embarrassed for you, Emily smiled guiltily. Come on, it happens. I wasn't very smart myself with that bet with my dad, the boy laughed. You could say I get it deservedly so. Too bad you end up suffering too. Okay, I'm going to go now, guys. The auditors are coming tomorrow. We'll count the losses. It's already clear that this amount of money could have been used to buy more than one tomograph. I'm already terrified. Hang in there, Kevin put his arm around her shoulders. We're with you mentally. The damage assessment had indeed been tumultuous. It resulted in more than one police report. The former head doctor became a criminal case, and his accomplices included Tom, who had betrayed Emily. His mother even went to her son's ex-fiancé, crying, demanding to take back the statement, but Emily was adamant. She certainly had no pity for her wife. The same nurses who'd been harassing Kelly for years were also fired. They, too, had been involved in the doctor-in-chief's machinations. Emily ended up making Kevin the charge nurse on the ward. She had enough experience. Kelly had taken additional training to improve her skills and was now recruiting new staff on the ward herself. Adam had been discharged from the clinic, and he'd rented an apartment nearby where he'd put his mother. He took the girl under his wing. In public, they were extremely friendly. But Emily and Kevin knew the couple was already in a relationship. They had started dating themselves. Although Emily was slow to open up after Tom's betrayal, people were hard for her to trust. And while Emily was dealing with the problems of the clinic, her mother, during the annual medical examination, found a serious disease, a tumor requiring surgical intervention. At first, they thought she'd be fine without surgery. But the treatment wasn't working well. Sarah grew weaker. Watching her agony, Kevin advised, take her to our clinic. We'll take a look at her, keep an eye on her. Can you operate on her yourself? Emily asked. I only trust your judgment. Well, I'm not an oncologist. It takes a specialist, Kevin stretched out doubtfully. And then I don't have much surgical experience. And there are medical ethics too. In fact, we try not to take family and friends for surgeries. Come on, what's so stupid? Superstitious Emily took umbrage. I trust you. Mom does too. That's enough to make up my mind. Oh, don't push it, please, Kevin begged. It's not that simple. I'd still like to examine her first, get the test results and stuff. Well, of course I trust you completely, Emily replied cheerfully to her lover. Whatever you say, that's what we'll do. But after 2 weeks, it became clear that they were just wasting time at the clinic. Kevin, who had agreed to this adventure under the influence of the moment, was increasingly having reasonable doubts about the need for treatment. His personal tests were getting worse. Oncologists insisted on surgery, while Emily and her mother acted like ostriches, pretending it was none of their business. Kevin came to Adam with his thoughts on the subject and unexpectedly found a support group. Well, if you're not sure about the outcome of the operation, then say no, his friend advised. Why are you freaking out? I've been snitched on. Do it yourself, and I'm not an oncologist. You need a specialist of a different level. Yeah, my mother had treatment, Adam confirmed. I even know that the best clinic for it is in our neighboring state. The doctors there literally work miracles. There's a professor. He extended my mom's life for 3 years. A real professional. You get me Sarah's labs, I'll send them to him to look at. Thank you, of course. But have you ever heard of doctor-patient confidentiality? Kevin said indignantly. Yeah, we've got a man on the verge of life and death here, Adam reminded him. Let's ask Emily. That same evening, they called the owner of the clinic. Emily was tired, talking sluggishly, not thinking straight. That's why she didn't take Adam's offer with enthusiasm at first. But he argued passionately, Emily, I know that in this disease, time is the most valuable resource. Let's show the professor the results. After all, it will cost you nothing. And in fact, I'm willing to pay for the operation too. It's expensive, but it's a real chance. Thank you all for the offer. But I think we've already decided everything. Mom had the surgery with Kevin's participation and stay out of it altogether. Okay, well, what's your problem? Adam resented. Just think about it. The oncologist at your clinic isn't the best. Kevin's a trauma specialist in general. Surgery is his secondary specialty, not his main one. What are you going to accomplish by being so stubborn? I mean, we're talking about a real person here. With what? Stop bullying. Well, just because you've had a bad experience doesn't mean others will. Emily, look, this isn't a game. Let me just send the tests. Well, please, okay, get the chart, the statement, whatever you need. Just tell me, I'll take care of it. Just don't argue with Kevin directly. I could barely get him to help me. He's hysterical. The level of responsibility. Like I'm not scared. Adam received and sent all the information to the very same professor. The verdict was unequivocal. Surgery was urgently needed. There could be no delay. Emily immediately lashed out at Kevin. She demanded that he set a date. Meanwhile, Sarah was getting worse. She couldn't get up anymore. She felt weak all the time. It was becoming clear that the surgery itself would also be questionable with her vitals. The morning before the operation, Kevin suddenly realized that he could do nothing. He was in a state of real terror. His hands were shaking and waves of panic came over him. Even while trying to shave, Kevin had made several cuts, and at the thought that his scalpel hand might shake, he immediately felt sick. He called Emily, who was already at the clinic, and was just as nervous. Honey, I'm sorry, I think I have a cold. I can't operate today, he blurted out. But you were still fine yesterday. Or did you just chicken out? Kevin, what's even going on? Well, yeah, I'm a coward. I can't do anything about it. Emily, I agreed to all this under your pressure. And now I realize the situation is delusional. Well, think about it. A surgeon with no experience. But what's it going to do to your mom? What am I supposed to do? Emily said indignantly. You're setting everyone up because of your own cowardice. That's not a manly thing to do at all. It's better to be a coward than to lose a patient, Kevin answered her. That's what I was taught. Emily, when my hands are shaking, I couldn't shave properly. Do you want the same thing to happen with the scalpel? No, Kevin, Emily replied quietly. But what's there to do? I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm going to stay home tonight anyway. Emily hung up the phone and cried, realized that time was almost gone. Just then she got a call from Adam. So, has the surgery started? He asked. I'll be there to support you. It's not going to be anything, Emily sobbed into her voice. Kevin's hands are shaking. He's backed out. But it's for the best, Adam said confidently. I'll check with the professor right now to see if he'll take your mom's surgery." An hour later, he arrived at the clinic in person. His face was solemn and joyful. "Anyway," the doctor said to take the patient away. "He will see her himself today and schedule the operation. Well, in the next few days for sure. And don't worry about the money. I've already paid for everything from the room to the rehab." "You're crazy," Emily cried again. "Well, how are we going to arrange transportation? Bogging down the roads. Mom won't be able to bear it. Besides, it's a pretty long way to the neighboring region." "Well, what can I tell you? Actually, I've ordered an air ambulance. It should arrive in a couple hours," Adam answered her. "Emily, let's sign off. We need to get ready, and you need to get yourself organized." "Wow." "Well, yeah," she smiled weakly. "Looks like you're my hero today." Adam smiled. Together they had organized Sarah's preparations for transportation rather quickly and intelligently. She fell into oblivion now and then. There was really no time to delay. A couple hours later, the helicopter arrived. Only the patient and her daughter were taken on board. Adam got in the car and drove off. 4 hours later, he was already in the courtyard of the clinic where that famous professor worked. In the waiting room, he found Emily. She was sitting almost exhausted. It turned out that after the examination, Emily was immediately taken to the surgery, which was still going on. 15 minutes later, Ben the doctor came out to see them. He greeted Adam like an old acquaintance and said that the operation had been successful. Mom had been sent to the ward in a sterile post-op box for now, and future prognosis depended solely on her body. "Why did you take so long?" rebuked her doctor. "In such cases, the disease progresses rapidly." But our oncologist said there was still time. Emily excused herself. "Besides, I don't take my mom by the hand to the doctors, so they found out too late." "Well, you should. You just have to take your elderly parents to the doctors," Ben replied. "They're not always ready to go themselves." Emily nodded. She felt a huge sense of relief that the surgery was behind her. She and Adam headed to the coffee machine, then drove over and got a room for her at a nearby hotel. It was decided that Emily would stay in this town for at least a week. Adam promised her that he would keep her work at the clinic under his supervision. In the evening, Kevin called. "Do you hate me now?" he asked. "I'm a wimp and a wimp. That's what I am." "Oh, come on. Our oncologists overlooked a lot of things, too. It doesn't matter now. Mom's out of surgery. She's even recovered from the anesthesia." "What's going to happen to us next?" Kevin asked. "Will the relationship continue or what?" "Let's take a break for now," Emily suggested. "I don't have time for lovemaking and fighting anyway. I need to get my mom back on her feet. That's the most important thing. Everything else comes later." "You're dumping me," Kevin declared. "Or maybe the surgery is just an excuse. Have you even wanted to break up for a long time?" "Are you delusional?" Emily asked. "That's it. Sorry. I don't have time. My mom's calling." She hung up the phone and Kevin went to get on night duty. There weren't many patients on the ward. He went over the histories, the appointments. Then he called Nurse Kelly into his office. They went over the current appointments. Afterward, Kevin offered to have coffee with her, and in between, he told her about his spat. "Kevin, you realize she's not a medical professional, so she sees things differently," Kelly explained to him. "To me, your frustration is completely understandable and obvious. After all, the main principle of treatment is to do no harm. And to her, such doubts look like cowardice." What am I saying? You really understood me right away. And Emily's got some unexplainable problems, Kevin rejoiced. And anyway, it's probably right that we're splitting up. Apparently, doctors need to find their own kind to marry. Right. Who else are you going to tell what happened in the operating room? Kelly laughed. By the way, Tom and I only have a friendship now, too. It didn't work out. Instead of romance, it was discussing you and Emily all the time. I think he's secretly in love with her in general. Jealous? Or don't care? Kevin smiled. No, of course not. If they're going to be happy, let them be. Kelly smiled too. Okay. I'm going to go run your errands. Evening shots and medications are coming up soon, no time to talk. Kevin grinned at her and didn't understand how he had been able to ignore the simple truths for so long. Kelly was much closer to him than Emily, and now the breakup seemed like a blessing in disguise. Meanwhile, Emily spent hours at her mother's bedside. She was on the mend, but she still needed comprehensive treatment. Adam had paid for it at once, so Emily had no additional expenses. He came almost every day, a couple of times even in the company of her father. Steve's visits had a special effect on Sarah. On such days, she demanded her daughter's best lace shirt and robe. She painted her lips and her eyes took on a special glow. With Emily, too, Steve had settled things, finally listening to Adam's arguments that she would never agree to do such an interview. "Mom, do you like Tom?" Emily's mother once asked, gathering her for a walk. "Great guy. Not like your ex," Sarah replied. "By the way, his father is pretty great too." "Yeah, we see you two making eyes at each other," Emily smiled. "Who knew you were such a flirt?" "I've got Steve calling me in the evenings now. Yesterday he was at the opera with his partners, videotaping Ada. I'm sitting here listening to it like I've been there myself. In fact, he promised we'd go. I just need to get well soon. There are so many interesting things around and I miss everything." "So you're having an affair?" Emily gasped, right under the kids' noses. "And we don't suspect a thing." "You'd better keep up too," her mother chastised her. "Because I don't think I'm going to have any grandchildren. It's time to get married. If you don't figure it out for yourself, I'll hint it to Adam. I'll have to take it into my own hands." "Well, no, we'll do it ourselves," the daughter replied. That evening, she and Adam marveled at their blindness. He, of course, had noticed that Dad had changed, but he hadn't paid much attention to it. And it turned out that Steve had taken a fancy to Emily Mommy. "Now we have to get ahead of them," Emily said. "Get married first," Adam laughed. "Otherwise you'll be related to me. And in that case, it's kind of not very pretty to get married anymore. I propose." "I accept," laughed Emily. "Where's the ring?" Adam twisted something that looked like a circle out of the grass stalks. "This one for now. The real one will be too. Give me some time to think about it. Because I'm a fickle girl. I'll be in the hospital a little longer and I'll marry Professor Komutov for sure." When Sarah was discharged, everyone returned to their hometown. Things at the clinic, thanks to the new head doctor, were going fine, almost without requiring Emily's intervention. Mom moved almost immediately from her and her daughter's modest apartment to Steve's multi-room country house. Adam and Emily settled into the apartment they had inherited from their father and began preparing for the wedding. Upon hearing about it, Kevin and Kelly suggested that they have a couple's ceremony. Everyone was thrilled with the idea. The women immediately began to make plans for the organization of the event, the place, the decor, to look at styles of wedding dresses. Kevin and Adam just laughed. But they did not argue with their lovers and agreed to the appointed day. Both couples signed in the registry office and then married. To the altar, Emily was led by Adam's father. On the holiday walked almost all the employees of the clinic, and those who stayed on duty were sent a piece of wedding cake in beautiful boxes. Looking at her happy daughter, Sarah herself was ready to take another risk and get married. And when she caught one of the bride's bouquets, everyone laughed with relief. Now it was safe to blame the coming marriage on a well-known man. But not only fun accompanied Emily's everyday life. She was getting deeper and deeper into the life of the clinic, and even went to get additional management training. She was sure to need it in business. Kelly also enrolled in medical school. At her husband's urging, she wanted to become a pediatrician. The former head doctor of the clinic and his accomplices were put on trial. The man received the maximum penalty for his embezzlement. Ben's theft was too brazen. He begged for reconciliation, but Emily was adamant. This man, who almost ruined her father's business, hardly deserved leniency. Tom, on the other hand, got a lesser sentence in juvie, and vice versa, showered Emily with curses, blaming her for his failures. And after learning that the former lover is already married, and in general, as if off the chain snapped, but his hysterics no one was no longer interested. After all, young families were waiting for a new addition.
The shoe was stuck in the iron bars and would not leave its new shelter. Emily even cursed, looked around and freed her foot from the temporary trap. The shoe was still in place, so she crouched down and began to pull the unfortunate shoe, trying not to scratch the heel. She was going to meet a very important person, from whose gaze such a detail as a spoiled shoe would not be hidden. It was better not to risk it. The iron bars clamped down on the heel like an angry bull terrier on a chop. But Emily wasn't used to giving up so easily. She didn't care that she was standing with one foot in the dust, and the sharp stones were tearing her pantyhose. As luck would have it, there was no one around, and she couldn't even ask for help. "I don't care," she shrieked, not without spitting on the shoe. "You think I can't do it without you? You bet I can, even if I'm barefoot. Can I help you?" A man's voice suddenly sounded above her ear. Emily flinched and turned around. In front of her stood a handsome young man in overalls. Ouch. The girl was confused. "Yes, I could use some help. You see, I'm stuck." The guy, without asking unnecessary questions, deftly extracted the shoe from the trap and handed it to Emily. From the outside, it all looked like a shabby prince offering Cinderella to try on a crystal slipper on a high stiletto. Emily embarrassedly snatched the shoe from the stranger's hands, deftly put it on her foot, and smiled. "You are, you might say, my savior. I was about to say goodbye to her, but then you showed up." "You shouldn't have," laughed the guy. "The shoes are expensive, I can tell. You shouldn't throw it away so easily. Besides, there are no hopeless situations in life. Never give up, even if it seems that everything is lost." "I'll do my best," Emily smiled and waved goodbye to the stranger. It was only a couple houses away from their destination. Emily sped up her steps, as she didn't want to be late. John Smith was already waiting for her in the park's cozy coffee shop at his usual spot. Emily went straight to the man. "Emily, my dear." John got up from the sofa and looked at her from head to toe. "You look beautiful. You always do." "Thank you." Emily blushed slightly. "John, will you excuse me for being late? Was there an emergency?" No, I'm the one who's early." The man hastened to reassure her, but Emily saw the faintest flicker of displeasure in his eyes. "Let's not waste time. I'll show you everything at once." Emily took out of her bag a voluminous catalog and put it in front of her. "Is there anything interesting?" The man perked up immediately. "I think so." Emily nodded. "You know John Smith. I always show everything to you first. You're on our payroll. We just finished the catalog. Sarah Thompson sent me straight to you. A lot of Chinese porcelain this time. As I recall, that's your subject, isn't it?" Oh yes. John's eyes lit up, and he poured himself greedily into the catalog. I, of course, more on imperial porcelain. You know what my collection is, but I will not refuse china. And in the price is always growing, and pleasing to the eye. You've seen how filigree always these vases and statuettes are executed. Emily worked in a private gallery, and John was considered one of the biggest art connoisseurs in town. He was an avid collector, investing heavily in antiquities. Emily was his favorite agent, introduced them to Henry Johnson, who devoted his entire life to antiques. John was his longtime friend, and they had once hunted for precious art together. Porcelain was their shared passion. But as Henry grew older, his passion waned because of illness. Grandfather liked Emily's passion for antiquities. When she was a baby, they spent hours in his store. She would gaze breathlessly at the porcelain figurines that reflected the spirit of different eras and peoples. Henry told her a million stories with enthusiasm. This hobby eventually turned into a profession. Emily graduated from the Institute of Culture and received a specialty of restorer. And then, thanks to her grandfather's connections, she began working at the local state gallery. The profession was not monetary, but very interesting. Emily fiddled enthusiastically with reactive special restoration mixtures and literally restored masterpieces, which were about to fall into oblivion. It seemed to her a real miracle. The girl didn't need much money. Her grandfather was a rich man by the standards of the city. He did not drive his favorite granddaughter to work until exhaustion. Emily's passion flattered him. In addition, he was frankly proud that he was able to instill in the girl a love for what he himself valued most of all. But a few years passed, and Emily was offered a promising position in a newly opened private gallery. Its owner, Sarah Thompson, was an old acquaintance of her grandfather, so the career quickly went uphill. Starting as an assistant, Emily quickly settled in and after a year became a senior art historian. She was not only well-versed in art, but also able to find a common language with the most fastidious clients. John Smith was one of them. "Nice selection, John," announced in a high-pitched tone as he closed the catalog. "Can you give me this edition for a couple of days? I can tell you now that I would like to buy a couple of things, but I'd like to look at them in more detail. At my age, moods change dramatically. In case something else catches my fancy. I like to contemplate. Even photographs can sometimes fascinate me enough to make me want to own the original." Of course, the girl nodded. "You only please do not delay, because Sarah Thompson wants to organize an exhibition, a presentation. In 2 months, it is necessary to prepare the exposition. I've already invited so many guests that I feel I won't be able to rest. You know what's on me? You, my girl, don't worry." The man patted her hand. "I'll give you a final answer one of these days. I'll call Sarah myself. I'll tell her what I need to postpone." Emily left the cafe with a sigh of relief. Don't worry about the commission, she told herself. The main thing is to have time to prepare the exposition. Also, the house is a mess. What's wrong? John Smith was worried. Is there anything I can do to help? I can. The girl shook her head. No, it's all right. Just personal problems. It all came together at once. Don't be silent, Emily. If I can help, John Smith offered. Thank you. Okay, I'll leave the catalog. Then I'll call you as soon as I decide. In the meantime, I'm going to run an errand. I'll see you later. Say hi to Grandpa, she said. I'll be sure to tell him. Would you stop by and see him? I rarely get to him, and he's not feeling well. His heart is racing. Emily sighed. Yes, I'm afraid for him, too. Don't worry, my girl, everything will be fine. Emily said goodbye and walked out. There was no more business scheduled for today. Sarah Thompson said to go home right after the meeting. But Emily didn't feel like going home at all. She went to the nearest candy store and bought a couple of air cakes. Holding the brightly colored box tightly, the girl headed toward the house on the waterfront where her grandfather lived. It took a long time for the door to be opened. Emily didn't have her keys. The visit to her grandfather's house had been unplanned. Strangely, she pounded her knuckles on the door anxiously. Where could he have gone? And the phone was silent. He'd forgotten it again. What kind of person knows I worry when he doesn't pick up the phone? Emily was about to leave when Henry finally opened the door. Emily, what a joy. I didn't see that coming. Why did you come without calling? The girl was indignant and hugged her grandfather tightly. You don't answer yourself. I'm worried. Come on, Henry waved her away. I just fell asleep. It happens at my age. I got up early in the morning. Well, that's good, Grandpa. Look what I brought. Emily squinted enigmatically and showed me a box of brownies. I know it's bad for you, but what's life without sweets? That's true, sweetheart, Henry laughed. Let's not eat until 6, or the nurse will be here to give me my shots. If she sees me, I'm in trouble. But we still have 40 minutes, nodded her granddaughter. I'll stay with you for a while, or they'll lose me at home. Tell me, how are you doing? Because you look pale, tired. I'm fine. I've got a lot of work to do. We're getting ready for the new exhibition. I just met John Smith. He says hello to you. He said he'd drop by. John? Henry chuckled. I haven't seen him in a while. He's been away on business. I wish he'd come to see an old friend more often. He's probably looking for something better for himself again. Yeah, they brought in a lot of Chinese porcelain. I handed him the catalog and his eyes lit up. I could tell he had his eye on a couple of pieces. I remember back in the day. I'd like to buy something myself, but what's the point? There's no point in collecting anymore. I don't have much time left. Come on, Grandpa, full of pessimism. You're only 76, you've got a lot of years ahead of you. We have a good heredity. Your father lived to be 100 years old. Are you burying yourself already? It's no big deal if you have a bad heart. It's not a problem with the current level of medicine. The main thing is to take care of yourself. You should come and see me more often. When I see you, I immediately feel young. You have such positive energy. I'd love to, but you know I don't have time. And at home. That witch is driving me crazy again. Alex, why don't you get involved? I would never let my mother treat my wife like that. It's about time you two got your own place. 5 years of marriage and still in the same place. And there's an empty apartment. Alex doesn't want to Emily's side. He says it's your apartment and he's uncomfortable. He's uncomfortable. Henry was indignant. Are you comfortable with her constant nagging? Why does she dislike you so much? I don't know. It was tolerable before, but for the last 6 months she's been going off the rails. It's none of my business, granddaughter. But I think if you want a quiet family life, you should move out. It's only going to get worse. I know that kind of woman. She won't rest until she's completely dried you up. And the kids will come. What then? Grandpa suddenly got serious. Emily, you know that Alex and I can't have children. That's why Lyubov Markovna is so mad. She wants grandchildren, and I can't. When she found out that I have such a disorder in my body, she started her attacks. It feels like she's deliberately trying to break us up so that he'll find another woman who'll give birth to an heir. And what an inheritance. All they have behind them is an apartment and a shabby cottage. If I were your mother-in-law, on the contrary, I would protect you. If I die, you'll inherit everything. Grandpa, why do you say that? Emily was upset. John and I love each other. He's never been interested in your money. Well, maybe not to him, but I had the honor of talking to Lyubov Markovna. She kept trying to find out the size of my capital. You can't choose your relatives, girl, but to live with them on the same territory is to put nails in your coffin. Come on, we'll be fine, Emily said. I'm at work most of the time, John too. We only see each other in the evenings. And on weekends, Lyubov Markovna usually goes either to the country or to her friends. I see how well you're doing. You're not even in a hurry to get home. I'm not in a hurry, because I came to you and want to spend more time here, smiled Emily. So what if your mother-in-law is a witch? Every other family is like that, and they live. I feel sorry for you. Emily. Henry patted her on the head. I just want you to be happy. I am happy. Hugged his granddaughter. I have a man I love, a job I love. I don't need anything else. I just have you all to myself, Henry smiled. My parents have suffered so much in their lives and lost them early. That's what I'm worried about. I understand, Grandpa. Emily poked him on the cheek. But believe me, I'm fine. By the way, you know, I got my heel caught in a grate today, stuck on the sidewalk. Barely made it out. Well, at least there are still some kind people out there. At 6 a.m. sharp, the doorbell rang. It was the nurse. Emily stayed at her grandfather's house for a short time and went home. It was raining outside. The girl called a cab and in 10 minutes stood at the door to her apartment. Alex was not at home. Emily was even surprised. The clock was already showing the 9th hour. He was usually back by this time. But Lyubov Markovna met her on the doorstep. "And where do we go?" grumbled unhappily mother-in-law. "I was at work, then I slipped off somewhere." "And why do you ask?" calmly replied Emily. "Where did she get off?" "I came home, no wife, no wife." "And where is he?" "I thought he hadn't come back yet," Emily wondered. "Would you pick up the phone when your husband calls?" "Maybe I would." Emily looked at the screen of her smartphone, puzzled. "I always answer the phone. How can you be so irresponsible?" Love boiled. "But I don't have any missed calls or messages." "Where did he call?" "To his workplace. I don't take it with me after I leave the gallery." "Should you? You're supposed to be in touch." "I am." Emily was indignant and felt the anger beginning to boil inside her. "He's not stupid. He should know that if I don't answer at work, I should call on my cell phone." "Okay, it's all just silly. I'm telling you, Lyubov Markovna, you know, I went to my friends. Said he won't be back tonight." "What do you mean he's not coming back?" Emily's eyebrows went up. Just like that, the mother-in-law said, hiding her face in a smile. "They went fishing." "You don't have to wait until Sunday." "But why didn't he even warn me?" Emily didn't understand what was going on. "Why would he warn you? He's a grown man. It's the weekend." "Or are you against your husband having his own time? You know, girl, this kind of control isn't going to do any good." "To what kind of control?" Emily raised her voice. "Do I tell him not to do anything? Just call and say he's going away. Especially for almost 3 days." Emily immediately dialed her husband's number, but his phone was off. "Don't even try to reach him," Cynthia gritted through her teeth. "There's no reception. He's on the road at 03000 hours. He said he'll call when he's online." "That's ridiculous." Emily shook her head. "Okay, if you say so, then that's the way it is. I don't see the point in taking this argument any further. I'm tired, Cynthia. Can't I just go and rest?" "I haven't cooked dinner?" Her mother-in-law grinned maliciously. "Still no. You can cook something for yourself. And now we've completely relaxed. Do you even remember the last time you stood at the stove?" "I don't understand," Cynthia snapped suddenly. "Emily, as I recall, you fiercely defended my right to stand at the stove. It was all girls. You can't. He doesn't like it. Mommy knows best." "Thank you so much for taking over the cooking, but I didn't ask you to. If you don't want to cook for yourself without problems, I will. Besides, no one canceled delivery. Don't get excited. I won't starve to death." "How you talk. Indignant mother-in-law. Don't forget, my dear, that you live in my apartment, and therefore, according to my rules. You haven't opened your mouth in front of Alex. I'll tell him all about the way you treat me. Do whatever you want." Emily shouted. "Do you think I'm stuck in your apartment like this? I don't know how you work Alex so hard to keep him from moving out. But I promise, as soon as he gets back, I'll bring it up again." On Saturday, Cynthia left for the cottage. Even awake, Emily was glad to see her gone. Her mother-in-law, as expected, had not prepared breakfast, but the girl was not upset. She quickly kneaded the dough and fried a mountain of appetizing pancakes, which almost all ate. Emily's figure wasn't something to be watched. She was one of those rare breeds that no matter what you fed them, they would still be slim and neat. Emily was happy with her constitution, because with a busy work schedule, she could not train in the gym, and sit on a diet was impossible. So much energy was expended during the day that if she ate a meager diet, she would just faint on the way, eating the last pancake. Emily washed the dishes and dialed Alex's phone. It was still silent. "Well, you've got to be kidding," the girl thought. "You have to leave like that and not say a word." I bet Cynthia was whispering nonsense to him. She swore she'd tell me everything. She's a chatterbox. Well, it's easier to ignore it. I'd better think of something to do today. It's a day off after all. The weather's nice. Maybe go to the cemetery. It's been a long time since I've been there. I'd like to take Grandpa with me. "Hello, Grandpa," Emily said excitedly into the receiver when Henry answered. "My little birdie, greetings. I wasn't expecting you. What are you doing home so early?" "Grandpa, listen. I was thinking maybe we could visit my parents at the cemetery. It's been a while. Wouldn't you like to see them? Let's go, of course, Grandpa said. Aren't you with your husband today? He's gone. I'm all alone at home. So I thought, when will I ever get away again? Come on, get ready. I'll call a cab and we'll go together. I'll be right there. Emily got dressed and went outside. She went into a flower shop and bought some white lilies, then called a cab and went to her grandfather's house. Henry was already waiting for her in the driveway. He looked quite alert. Apparently, the new medication his doctor had prescribed was doing its job well. There was even a blush on his cheeks. "Hi, Grandpa," kissed his granddaughter when he got into the cab. "And you are fresh and alert. I'll watch this, because yesterday I saw how that nurse tortured me. They don't make women like that these days." "Where'd you find her? She'd get me out of this world if I needed her." "You like it?" she laughed. "You're just lonely. That nurse is a good nurse. Sarah Thompson recommended her to me. She used to babysit her mom? Tough. Yeah, I bet she is. But she's good at her job, and I'm sure you'll always have plenty to talk about." "Oh yes," suppressed a chuckle grandfather. "This lady will surprise everyone. I had no idea she was so interested in art. Not as a professional, of course, but still. We talked to her for hours. It's not boring." I'm glad Emily laid her head on her grandfather's shoulder. "And I bought flowers for Mom and Dad. Look how pretty they are." "Yeah, Amber loved those. We had a flower garden at our old house. Your grandmother always planted white lilies. Little Snail, always hiding in the flower bed, getting pollen all over her. And we'd run around looking for them." "How many years has it been?" The cab pulled up to the cemetery. Emily and her grandfather got out in front of the massive cast-iron gate and headed down the main avenue into the depths. Along the way they looked at the figurative monuments, the birds singing very loudly. Autumn was coming, but it was still very warm. The sun was shining in summer. Breaking through the thick, not yet begun to yellow leaves, thousands of sun bunnies lay on the paving stones. At last they reached the place. A tall monument of gray granite cast a large shadow. From the polished slab smiled a man and a woman, forever imprinted on the soulless stone. Emily's fingers touched the cold, smooth slab. She gently stroked the faces and placed the flowers she'd brought in a vase, taking the dried bouquet from there. "Hello," Amber Henry murmured. "And hello, Fred. I'm sorry we don't come to see you often enough. I've gotten so bad. I think I'm going to join you for good." "Grandfather, are you at it again?" Emily frowned. "Mom, Dad, don't listen to him. I'll take care of Grandpa. You'll have to be without him for a while." Emily's parents died together. Both had a passion for mountain climbing. Henry Johnson, who lost his wife early, guarded his daughter Amber more than any treasure. But the girl was very active and ambitious. When she married Fred, her classmate, her happiness was boundless. Henry did not like his son-in-law, although he had practically no common interests with him. But it was enough for him to know that Fred loved Amber and would do anything for her. The energetic young couple had been interested in mountaineering since college. When Amber and Fred were in the same course, Henry didn't like his daughter's hobby much. After all, each ascent was associated with a huge risk. But it was useless to dissuade Amber. With Fred's appearance, Henry calmed down a little. The strong man could always back up his fragile wife, and he chose less dangerous routes. Often the couple confined themselves to the climbing wall. And when Amber got pregnant and completely abandoned their hobby, with the birth of Emily in the house came great joy. The girl was not by years of development. Early learned to walk and talk. Parents actively engaged in her education, enrolled in many circles, giving the child the opportunity to choose a class to his liking. But most of all, little Emily liked to spend time in the antique shop of her grandfather, where she often ran away. Parents did not even guess that their daughter was truant. After all, every night she was met by a smiling grandfather, covering up his granddaughter's secret hobbies. When Emily went to the 3rd grade, her parents suddenly informed her that soon they planned to go to Elbrus. The conquest of this mountain peak was their longtime shared dream. After almost 10 years of break, going to the mountains was quite dangerous. But as Fred liked to joke, a mountaineer is forever a mountaineer. No one could have imagined that this trip would be the last of their lives. The deaths of the Henry couple were reported a week after Amber and Fred left. Emily still remembered how her grandfather had turned pale and literally shrunk in front of his eyes when he heard the terrible news on the phone. Details were scarce, both had gone off a cliff. Fred's anchor failed and he, who was the first to go, fell off, pulling Amber, who had not had time to secure the hook. They didn't find the bodies right away. Emily didn't remember the funeral well. Both she and her grandfather were in a kind of oblivion, unwilling to accept the terrible truth. Numerous relatives and family friends took it upon themselves to organize the funeral, wake, and other events. Emily abandoned her studies, stopped talking. Grandfather, on the contrary, went to work, hired for his granddaughter governesses, but after closing the shop rushed home to make sure that Emily is all right. He hired a psychologist who came to the girl every day and had heartfelt conversations with her, talking himself, constantly looking for ways to bring his granddaughter out of her mental state. For a 10-year-old girl, what happened was a true nightmare, because her parents were almost everything to her. Gradually, Emily came to her senses. Riding lessons helped. At first, Henry simply brought his granddaughter to the racetrack. The psychologist claimed that an-on therapy is very effective for the treatment of mental traumas. Emily treated them with sugar and apples. The girl gradually began to talk and then asked to climb on the horse. Henry did not spare any money for his granddaughter. Visits to the racetrack became regular. He even bought her her own horse, for which Emily came to the stall twice a week. Over the years, the wound healed. She and her grandfather often traveled to the cemetery, where they could hold conversations with the smiling and eternally frozen faces of Amber and Fred. After graduating from high school, Emily enrolled in the Art Institute. She liked studying. She still continued to live with her grandfather, although he bought a separate apartment for his granddaughter. But the girl did not want to distance herself from the most beloved man in the world. Everything changed when she began to work in the State Gallery. Only weekends Emily could spend time with her grandfather. On weekdays, she often stayed late, trying to restore another time-damaged masterpiece. That day, Emily stayed longer than usual. A large collection of ancient mosaics had been brought in, and the entire staff was hard at work piecing together the smallest details. Emily returned home at midnight, having given her grandfather advance notice. When she entered the apartment, she immediately sensed something amiss. Henry rarely went to bed before 2 in the morning, and this time he didn't even come out to greet his granddaughter and offer a late dinner, as was his custom. Emily noticed the light on in the kitchen. She ran in without even taking her shoes off. Henry was lying on the floor with his arms out to the sides. Emily's heart clenched. On woozy legs, she walked over to her grandfather and tried to feel for a pulse. There was no heartbeat. Terrified, Emily dialed the ambulance and waited. She immediately remembered everything she'd been taught in her life safety class, direct cardiac massage, CPR. In desperate attempts, Emily pressed on her grandfather's chest and sobbed. Suddenly, he let out a long wheeze and hissed. Emily's heart sank. She began to kiss her grandfather, flooding his face with her tears. The ambulance came quickly, but by then Henry had regained consciousness. He flatly refused to be hospitalized, but Emily was adamant. They learned later that Henry Johnson was suffering from heart failure. And if Emily had returned a minute later that day, there was nothing that could have been done. But fate had it differently. Since then, a woman has been working at the house as a housekeeper and caregiver on a full-time basis. Emily quit and got a job in a private gallery, where the schedule was more gentle. It was there that she met Alex. Alex only came over on Sunday evenings. Emily sat in her room, trying not to attract her mother-in-law's attention. Emily greeted her husband angrily, finally. "What's the meaning of this?" "No matter what I start, it's all to no avail." Alex brushed it off. "I'm tired and hungry." "Alex, are you serious? You've been gone for 2 days. You didn't even give me any notice that you were leaving, and now you're just ignoring it. Why do I have to report back? I called you to warn you, but you didn't even pick up the phone, and it's my fault again. I'm not accusing you of anything, but that's not how it works. And you called my work number, even though you know my main number perfectly well. That's enough. I wanted to go out and the guys called me. I explained everything to my mom. She didn't say anything to you." "She did. She did. That's a separate conversation. After all, I am your wife. Interfering with my mom is not the best solution, especially since you know how she feels about me." Alex got angry. "You two are both pecking at me. You can't seem to split something." "What did she do to you?" "Nothing, but I got to her. I don't know what the argument was about. You're always on her side, even when you see she's wrong. You respect her age, How silly is that? She's not old, there's nothing wrong with her head, though I'm beginning to doubt it. Alex pressed his lips together. I don't know what happened between you two. I can only guess about another scandal. I'll talk to her, but please be patient. I'm already patient to the last of my strength. She started badgering me about my food. Please, let's go away. We have somewhere to live. I can't be on the same property with her anymore. Honey, you know that apartment is very far from my work. It's inconvenient to drive every day. I don't want to get up half an hour early. And you probably won't like cooking and cleaning. Your mother runs the whole house. That's all excuses. A million women can handle the work and the household. And I can do it, please, Alex, at least think about it. I just can't do it anymore. I'd rather sacrifice time than slowly destroy my psyche and my marriage. Alex kissed Emily's forehead. Okay, I'll think about it and talk to my mom. By the way, where's the fish? What fish? We were just relaxing in nature. Why bring home ruffles? Emily wondered. We could have dried them. I like mixed river fish, but Mom would blow our minds over fish hanging on the balcony. Alex laughed. No way. Okay, let's go out to dinner. I'm awfully hungry. Go by yourself. I don't want to see Cynthia Lewis right now. Besides, I've already eaten. Come back soon, I miss you. 2 months passed. Alex still hadn't thought about moving, citing his busy work schedule. He stayed late every day. Emily almost didn't notice it because she was working, preparing for the exhibition, even spending her weekends in the gallery. She was glad, because she didn't have to cross paths with her mother-in-law. But with her husband, too, she almost never saw him. In the evenings, Alex was in a bad mood, went to bed and turned away. In the morning, he was already rushing to work. The presentation at the gallery was very successful. Many exhibits were sold. Even Grandpa was pleased with his presence. But after the event, Sarah Thompson called Emily aside. Emily, she began softly. I know you've been working hard and must be pretty tired. The girl smiled a little shyly. I have a little business proposition for you. Basically, I'd like you to take a vacation next month, because you're not wearing your face. But Emily, sensing some kind of a catch. I have to go somewhere, Sarah Thompson exhaled. They know and they don't travel much. But I've got a lot on my plate here right now. I can't trust anyone else. Where to? New York. Emily, for a week, 2 weeks tops. An old acquaintance of mine has something of interest there. He's willing to give us a huge collection of copperware and silverware to sell. You can't miss out on something like that. We need to drive around, see what he is interesting. Pick up options for our gallery. He's got paintings, too. I've been wanting one for a long time. The man's not old. He's been sitting on his treasures like a stingy knight. Now he's selling them off. And you entrust me with such a responsible assignment? Emily was surprised. Who else? You've been working for me for so long, I couldn't find a better specialist. Besides, you alone can correctly assess the collection, estimate the restoration work. I'll pay you everything, don't worry, and I won't hurt you with the bonus. I'd go myself, but you know what I mean. Okay, Emily said after thinking about it. I'll go. It's a little tense at home right now, and I didn't want to leave my grandfather alone. I promise you, I'll stop by Henry Johnson's house a couple times. It's been a long time since we've had a heart-to-heart. Don't worry about it. You'll have a good time. It's New York. Thomas Wilson, our client, has a very interesting house, right on Fifth Avenue, an old mansion. I assure you, this trip will do you good, and you'll learn a lot about yourself as a professional. Okay, you got it, Emily smiled. I hope Alex won't mind too much. Alex didn't mind. He was even glad that Emily was going on a business trip. What's so weird about it? Alex was surprised. I'm very happy for you. I'd love to go to New York for a week or two, especially at someone else's expense. I'm so tired on vacation. It's time. Speaking of vacations, Emily was embarrassed. Sarah Thompson promised me a vacation next month. Maybe you should take one too, go on a vacation somewhere, especially since I'll be well paid for my business trip. Can we go to the seaside? And the commission after the exhibition is decent. That would be nice, Alex winked. We'll think about it. You go for now and don't worry about anything. And Mom will calm down. She is often provoking conflicts again these days. By the way, you still haven't decided anything about moving. Honey, let's do it after New Year's. You won't be back until mid-December. Who moves before the holidays? What's the big deal? New Year's Eve, new house. It's all very symbolic. I'm not going to giggle and beat my hands. This is how I leave my mom alone on a holiday. Let's do this, you come back, then we'll celebrate, then we'll go on vacation, and then we'll move in. Promise. The girl exclaimed, surprised at her husband's flexibility. I promise. Alex nodded and pressed his wife against him. The trip to New York was very successful. Thomas Wilson turned out to be a pleasant elderly man confined to a wheelchair. He enthusiastically told Emily about his huge collection, showed all his treasures, accompanying it all with fascinating stories. Free time, and there was a lot of it, the girls spent for walks. The Big Apple was in full swing preparing for the celebration of the new year. Rich illumination on the streets created the illusion of a fairy tale. Emily had traveled to New York City twice before. As a child with her parents and when she studied at the Institute. Now she just admired the city, went to warm herself in coffee shops, took a lot of pictures and reported everything to her grandfather. They often communicated by video. Henry Johnson loved this city. As a young man, he often traveled to New York for work and stayed there for long periods of time. It was here that he met his future wife, but never returned after her death. Grandpa. Emily enthusiastically broadcast as she showed Henry Johnson the Kazan Cathedral glowing brightly in the evening landscape. We should definitely come here together. Where would I go, little girl? Laughed grandfather. I'm not old enough to travel. I've seen enough of your happy face. No, grandfather, Emily resisted. It's not the same. It's more solemn in person. It smells like a holiday. Let's come in the summer, promise me. I know you love Peter. I do, Emily, but I'm afraid I won't live to see the summer, frowned grandfather. Emily, your death books again. I'm not talking to you. I'm done. All right, agreed, let's go. But you were going on vacation to the sea this winter. I'll have a lot of things to do in the summer. I'll make a deal, Sarah Thompson. She comes here a lot. We could ask her to take her place. We could do something fun, huh? It's so beautiful here. I might even stay here. Why? Is that a good idea? Henry Johnson was coaxing me. Grab your Alex and go. There's always a job for someone as skilled as you. That's how Sarah Thompson's gonna let me go. And I don't like changing jobs. No, that's just a dream. But I'm sure I'll be coming here more often. All right, granddaughter, laughed Henry Johnson. We'll see. Oh, that's it. My lady's here. You take your walk, I'm gonna go get my shots. Love you, Grandpa. Take care. Love you too, baby. Emily was walking down Rubenstein toward Nevsky. There was almost no snow on the sidewalks in the center. The tall girl on high heels deftly rounded the passers-by she met. Suddenly she felt her foot twist. There was a cracking sound. They're at it again. Emily thought with horror as she looked down at her feet. The heel was dangling treacherously on a thin piece of sole. This is a must. So I've had no luck with heels lately. I've degenerated to sneakers. I went for a walk, you see. Emily stood and laughed. It was impossible to walk so resolutely. She was about to call a cab, but her phone was dead. The battery dead. Oh, shit. Emily cursed. Really came a voice from very close by. I don't believe it. A man was standing next to her, laughing. At first, Emily didn't recognize him and wanted to reproach the stranger for his rude behavior. But after a closer look, she realized that the guy who had helped her free her heel from the bars a few months ago was standing in front of her. Only this time he was dressed not in a work overalls, but in a very decent coat. Is that you? The girl exclaimed in surprise. It looks like me, the guy smiled back. I see you have such a hobby breaking heels. Don't make me laugh. Emily laughed. I feel awkward enough as it is. I don't know how to get home with a broken heel. I wanted to call a cab, but my phone died. Let me give you a ride. How far is it? Oh no, it's inconvenient. I'd appreciate it if you'd call me a cab. That'll be enough. What's the point? I have a car over there, the man waved somewhere to the side. I actually noticed you from it. Just as I was about to drive off, bang. I see this picture. I didn't even believe it was you. But it would have been hard not to recognize you. The look is too memorable. And that hair. It's quite ordinary. Emily blushed. Even the hair is sparse. It's not often you see a young lady with such a mop of red hair without a hat. Aren't you afraid of getting cold? The weather here is deceptive. The wind is blowing. I'm hardened. Emily smiled. All right, I'll take it, I guess. But it's not far to Kanaya. I'm staying there. That's great. I'm going that way too. My name's Justin, by the way. And you're Emily? That's a cool name. My sister's Daria too. I'm here to see her, by the way. So you're not from around here? No, I think we're from around here. I'm on a little vacation. Once a year I come here to visit my sister. I let myself take a break from work. Why are we standing here? Let's get in the car. Emily took her new acquaintance under her arm and showed her, hopping on one foot. She thought to herself that it probably looked extremely comical from the outside. But it wasn't far to walk. After a couple of steps, Justin stopped and carefully opened the door of his car in front of Emily. The girl even whistled. The car was very expensive and shone beautifully with new paint and the lights of the garlands. Surprised, Justin laughed. Well, yes, such a car, mumbled Emily. When we first met you, you were wearing such a dirty overalls. I never would have thought that the person wearing it would be driving a car like that. It was Justin who was a little confused. At the time, I was on my way to get cigarettes from an apartment that was being remodeled, arrived in just a t-shirt. It was getting chilly. Well, I borrowed overalls from one of the workers. I'm surprised you remember me at all. I have the most ordinary appearance. Appearance, maybe an ordinary, but the smile. You can tell you're a good man, and did not pass by a girl in trouble. Raised that way. I agree that few people will stop now. They go here bending in their smartphones and prefer not to notice the world around them. Can you imagine how many people could be helped if they saw their grief in time? I've always been like that. I've always been like that. My sister's the same way. We're all human beings. We have to help each other, or there'll be nothing human left. Besides, I believe in karma. Today you help, tomorrow you'll be helped. Emily nodded logically. It's rare to meet someone like that these days. And we're here already. Well, it was nice to meet you, Justin. And I'm Emily, the young man smiled. And tell me, how long are you here for? I'm already leaving tomorrow morning. Why, have you been thinking for a while? Maybe I should take you out for coffee? You'll forgive me if I seem intrusive. I just don't believe in coincidence. We've met twice, and under the same circumstances. I mean, think about the odds of that happening. So I'd like to keep in touch. Okay, it's not fate, so yes. Don't feel bad, Emily smiled. We can see each other in our town. I work in a gallery. Do you know the model? He's an art man. You could put it that way. You're welcome to come. I'm there most days, except weekends. You can drop by at lunchtime. Let me leave my phone number. Are you interested in art too? You could say that Justin nodded. Only a different kind of art. I work in the IT field as an IT programmer. Surprised by the girl. Not exactly. Although that's what they call us in the commonplace. I prefer to be called an information systems engineer. Oh, I'm far from that. We're just now training our brainchild in culture. Are you an art historian? Not exactly, but great, Justine interrupted. I hope you won't refuse me a consultation too. If it would be within my power to do so, please do. Okay, it was nice to meet you. I'll be sure to call you when I get back. See you then, Emily smiled. At the airport, she even called Alex to arrange a meeting. Much to her surprise, her husband refused to come to pick her up. Amy, I'll be at work, he informed her. Take a cab. But we had an agreement. The wife was indignant. You're flying in at 12 noon? It's not like I can dash out of the office just to pick you up. What's the problem? Should I call a cab? Nothing, the girl said, frustrated. Just thought you might have missed me. I missed you, but I'm working. I'll see you tonight. Okay, Emily sighed. She made her own way home, where to her great relief she didn't catch her mother-in-law. Thank goodness she's not here, the girl thought. That's the last thing I want to do right now is listen to her lecturing. What is this? Emily noticed that there was a lipstick on her night table. It seemed like nothing out of the ordinary, but the tube was foreign. She removed the cap and looked at the bright red contents in bewilderment. "Is this what Cynthia Lewis puts on her makeup like this?" she pronounced. "Haven't noticed her like that. 6 decades old and colors like that. It's odd. And why is it in our bedroom anyway?" Emily quickly put the find out of her mind and started calling Sarah Thompson. Emily returned from her business trip, reported back, sent all her work files and arranged to come back the next day. She slept through the evening. Emily woke up when she heard Alex return. She immediately jumped out of bed and ran out to meet her husband. Alex stood in the doorway, disgruntled. "Is something wrong?" Emily asked worriedly. "You're back. It's kind of strange," Alex answered. "Where's Mom?" "I don't know. I arrived, she was gone. Call her. Get her location." "I don't feel like it." "I don't feel like it. It's probably for the best." "What are you talking about?" Emily's frowning. "Look, we need to talk. And Mom would just be in the way right now." "You're scaring me. Is it serious?" "Yes, Emily, it's serious." "Oh my God," the girl's pale. "What does Grandpa have to do with it?" Alex answered irritably, "You have a problem with him." "Of course. He's the closest thing I have to a family member. And you're standing there like that. I'm thinking about the worst. I haven't even called him yet." Alex silently went to the kitchen and poured himself some water, drinking the whole glass. The man turned around and looked at his wife seriously. "Next," he began, "we have to break up." Emily's breath caught from surprise, and her legs felt weak. "What do you mean, break up?" "In the most direct sense. I've fallen in love with someone else." "Are you kidding me right now? It's not funny." "Alex, I'm serious. Emily, I've wanted to tell you for a long time, but I've regretted it. And I wasn't sure how I felt before." "Before? What do you mean before? How long have you been with her?" 6 months. 6 months? Emily shrieked. "But how is that possible?" "Alex, I don't believe you. It's not true." "You're just kidding." "I'm not joking," her husband snapped. "Come on, you idiot. I'm telling you straight out that I don't love you anymore. I have another woman with whom I am happy, and she's expecting a child with me." "Oh my God." Emily slid down the wall to the floor. Tears came to her eyes. "You're just telling me this now? When else?" "I didn't think it was serious at first, but then I realized you and I were way out of our league." "And she is this about the baby?" Emily asked sadly. "Isn't it? So tell me." "It's not just the baby that I found out about recently. I've been in love with her for a long time. You could say that the pregnancy was the final factor in my decision." "I don't believe it," Emily sobbed openly. Tears were pouring down her face and salty streams into her mouth. "Emily, everyone, calm down. I did everything I could. I swear, I didn't mean it that way. It just happened." "It just happened," the girl laughed hysterically. "It just happened? You cheated on me. You hid the affair. And now you're expecting a baby. Is that what you call it? You betrayed me, Alex, and I loved you. Tell me. Does Cynthia Lewis know about this? Is she the one who's been covering for you? Is that what you were doing when you were supposedly working late and going on vacation with your friends? So answer me." "Don't get hysterical," Alex ordered. "Yes, that's it. What else do you want me to say?" "So everything is clear. Mom only found out recently. Don't blame her." "How do you like to do that?" "I told her when I found out Nikki was pregnant." "Nikki? That's whose red lipstick is on my night table. What, did you sneak her into our bedroom already?" "Only once, and not in the bedroom. I put it there myself. She dropped it by accident. I thought it was yours. I just brought her over to meet my mom." "You're crazy. Bringing your mistress here to our house, taking advantage of my absence." "Emily, don't overreact," Alex snapped at her. "This isn't our house. It's Mom's apartment." "I get it," Emily laughed, getting up from the floor. "Mom's apartment. So that's why you've been dragging your feet about moving in. You had it all planned out and were just waiting for the right time. And that witch. She knew everything from the start. Don't try to change my mind." I imagine her eyes lit up when she heard that Nikki was pregnant. Your mother's obsessed with grandchildren. She hated me when she found out I couldn't have kids. I know all that, and I only kept my mouth shut out of respect for you. You shouldn't have. It should have been over a long time ago. What do you want from me? I'm a young, healthy man. I want to be a father. Can't you give me that? It's not too late to break up as friends. You have your whole life ahead of you. You're beautiful, interesting, smart. Have your own life, but without me. I swear there are plenty of men out there who don't want kids for nothing. You're an idiot, Emily said. A star. Friends, you say? After such a betrayal, I don't want to know you. And you're telling me about friendship? It's over. I'll pack my things and leave tomorrow. Don't even try to come after me and apologize. Emily ran out of the kitchen and locked herself in her bedroom. She sobbed into her pillow at night. It's over, she thought. How could he do this to me? Is it my fault I can't have children? He swore that none of this mattered to him. And you were all over him, Mommy. I bet she's probably glowing with joy, realizing she got rid of me. I can live with Nikki and them. I can live on my own. The next day, Emily excused herself from work after lunch, telling Sarah Thompson that she needed to take care of some household chores. There was no time to delay. No reconciliation with Alex was out of the question, especially after his confession that his mistress was pregnant. Emily would surely forgive the treason itself. All the more her husband had confessed to it. But it was a real betrayal. Since childhood, her grandfather taught her that you can forgive anyone, except the traitor and hypocrites. Having cheated once, each of them could easily commit a second offense. Emily even felt lighter when she thought it over in the morning. Living under the same roof with a traitorous husband and a tyrant mother-in-law was unbearable. And here she was getting rid of two problems at once. When Emily tried to open the apartment with her own key, she found it didn't fit. The locks had even been changed, she thought gloatingly. It's okay if they don't open it. I'll call the police. After all, I have every right to take my things. She pressed the bell with all her might. The door was not open for a long time. At last there were sounds, clicks. Cynthia Lewis appeared on the threshold and grinned.
We thought you'd gone all the way out. Let me go. I've got things to pack. Emily gritted her teeth.
The mother-in-law obediently moved away, letting the girl inside. To Emily's surprise, she spotted a pair of high-heeled boots in the hallway. We have company, her mother-in-law grinned. Not us, girl Cynthia pursed her lips. You don't live here anymore, remember. It's not much use. Emily walked into the room. A girl a little younger than her was sitting on the couch. Alex stood with his back turned to the window. Hello, Emily said, raising her tone defiantly. You must be Nikki? Amy, Alex interrupted. Don't do that. Get your stuff and go. I'm smiling, Emily said. I won't interrupt you, mind your own business. Emily walked out and headed for the bedroom. She took a large bag out of the closet and began to put things in it. Cynthia Lewis, accompanied by Nikki, suddenly appeared on the doorstep. Both were watching the girl's actions intently. Can I help you? Emily asked wryly. Or are you just standing there, amusing yourself with the spectacle? You, Nikki, stay here and make sure this girl doesn't take anything extra, her mother-in-law smirked. I'll go and get her things from the bathroom. Okay, Aunt Cynthia, Alex's mistress said. I just don't know what she's allowed to take and what she's not. Cynthia chuckled to herself. It seemed that these two had known each other for a long time and were already working together. Fuck them. Emily said dryly out loud. I'll only take what's mine. I don't want anything that doesn't belong to me. If you're worried about the jewelry Alex gave me, it's in the jewelry box on the table. Eat all 2 nicknames. And this one too. Emily pulled the wedding ring off her finger and tossed it toward the woman. It clinked and rolled to the side. She threw clothes and makeup into her bag and reached for a beautiful chest. Hey, Nikki rudely called out to her. What's that? None of your business. It's my parents' stuff, Emily snapped at her. Don't you ever try to get your hands on it. You'll be ripped out without even blinking. Nikki, horrified by the threat, stumbled back to Cynthia Lewis, who was carrying a bag full of something. She's threatening me, Aunt Cynthia, cried the girl. How dare you? The mother-in-law lashed out at Emily. Emily shoved her aside, snatched the package from her hands, and headed for the exit. On her way out, she glanced into the living room. where Alex was still staring out the window. "Goodbye," Emily told him dryly and left the apartment for good. Her husband didn't even look back at her. Emily stood in the driveway, waiting for a cab. She looked at her bags with disdain, realizing that the last 4.5 years of her life had fit so easily into them. She hadn't said anything to her grandfather yet. She didn't want to worry him prematurely. The car pulled up and the driver helped load the bags into the trunk. Emily was already at Grandpa's house in 15 minutes, ringing the doorbell. She stood there in utter confusion. She didn't want to burden Henry with her problems. The old man might have a heart attack. The nurse opened the door. "Oh, hello," Emily mumbled. "Where's Grandpa?" "Hello, Emily," the woman nodded. "Henry Johnson was sick this morning, but he's fine now. He called me, and I called an ambulance right away." Emily turned pale, and the woman hurried to reassure her. "Don't worry, it was just a sudden drop in blood pressure. It's all fixed now. He's resting at his place." "Thank God," Emily exhaled and went into the apartment. The nurse looked at her bags in surprise, but didn't ask any questions. Emily dropped her burden and immediately rushed into her grandfather's bedroom. Henry Johnson was half lying there, reading a book. He grumbled indignantly when he heard the door open. "Marina, I told you not to disturb me." "Grandfather, it's me," Emily sobbed. Oh, Henry was surprised. "Emily, how are you here?" "I told Marina not to call you, not to distract you from your work." She didn't call. Emily reassured him. "You can't be stressed out right now. I'm here myself, but it's still 4:30. Did you get off work early? I missed my grandfather and Peter. How was your trip?" "It was fine," Grandpa. Emily smiled. "But you can't fool me. I can see your eyes are crying. Come on, tell me. I could never fool you." "Where?" "I'm coming to see you for good," the girl confessed.
What do you mean? Henry was surprised and raised himself on the pillows.
"Stay down and don't get up." Emily stopped him. "We broke up with Alex. If you don't mind, I'll stay with you for a while." "Wait, no, of course I don't mind. How could you even think that? It's your house too. But what do you mean we broke up? Are you fighting about that witch again?" "No," Grandfather. Emily took a deep breath and told Henry everything. The old man listened silently, stroking her hair. "I want to get back at him so badly. I'm so angry," Emily summarized. "Revenge is a useless thing," said her grandfather. "His deed will definitely boomerang back on him. You'll see. The best thing you can do is to forget all this. My girl, you're strong. You'll get through this. And I won't leave you. And let these people live their lives as they please. You're too good for this family. It's a despicable thing to do to a man like you. That doesn't speak well for them. Thank God it's all coming out now. Alex may be a scoundrel, but it was good of him to come clean. Now you have to file for divorce." Emily raised one eyebrow. "Why wait? I get your point. You're not going back, even if he crawls back on his knees. And there's no point in him getting ready to be a father now, and his mom won't let him. Forget it, girl. You're young, beautiful, and wonderful. You'll meet your love again." "Grandpa, what if I don't? I can't have children." Alex said it wasn't important to him at first. But look, he changed his mind as soon as there were more interesting prospects on the horizon. Emily took a serious look at Henry Johnson. "Listen to me. Believe me, children are the greatest happiness. But if God didn't give them to you, then you're destined for a more important mission. And if that's the case, there will be someone to share your joys and sorrows. The most important thing is not to despair. Did you bring your things?" The girl nodded. "Yes, I left it in the hallway. It's funny that there are only 2 bags. Can you imagine? Those guys were still standing there to make sure I didn't steal anything. Imagine I would have left everything but my mom's jewelry box. But I don't have time to go shopping right now. It's New Year's Eve. By the way, yes?" Grandpa shook his finger. "Let's go shopping for a Christmas tree one of these days. We'll put a big one up to the ceiling in the living room. Like we used to, remember?" "Of course I remember, Grandpa. How could anyone forget our Christmas trees?" Emily smiled. "Did you still have the old toys? You couldn't throw them away, could you?" "Are you crazy? Throw them away, you say? It's all plastic and stamped toys on Christmas trees nowadays. We have real antiques. Even the hair my parents used to put on the tree when I was a kid. No, honey. Everything's safe and sound. When's your day off? I have to work tomorrow and the day after that, and then we're all off for the holidays. And after January 5th, I'm going on vacation. So we'll spend a lot of time together. Alex and I were going away. But you see how things turned out. One thing's for sure, I'm not going anywhere. So at least I'll spend the holidays with you. I'll recover, have a good rest, without the constant nervousness. And after the vacation, I think I'll file divorce papers so I don't have to wait. Well, go unpack. Your room's always waiting for you. I haven't even touched anything in there. I just call the cleaning service every once in a while to clean it up. You get a good night's rest and everything will be fine. I love you so much, Grandpa. Emily gave the old man a big hug.
I love you too, granddaughter.
On her last day at work, Emily quickly finished all her work. She was already looking forward to the weekend and vacation. Sarah Thompson was very pleased with the results of her work, so without a shadow of a doubt, she let her ward go on a long vacation. Emily, the gallery owner, came into the office. Have you finished all the catalogs? Of course, Sarah. Emily responded, looking out from behind her computer. All that's left to do is check the catalogs for the vaults, and everything's perfect. I'll leave you to it. I'm going to run some errands. You then give the girls everything and you can rest easy. To congratulate Grandpa on the upcoming holidays, of course. Sarah smiled. Emily spent another hour with the paperwork. Having finished her work, she got ready to drink coffee. Suddenly there was a knock at the office. Come in, Emily shouted. Emily shyly looked at one of the gallery workers. There is someone to see you. A man. He said he was Justin. Justin? The girl thought. Oh yes, Justin, that's right. Tell him I'll be right there. Wow, that's unexpected. Why didn't he even call? Emily thought. Okay, I'll find out. I'm so glad I got this done. At least we can have a normal conversation. I'll just have coffee with him and invite him to my favorite coffee shop. Emily threw on her fur coat and dashed out of the office. As she walked down the stairs, she caught herself thinking that she was very pleased with Justin's visit. She liked the guy for his directness and sincerity. He was standing near the large mirror downstairs, scrutinizing one of the gallery brochures. Justin. Emily waved her hand at him. Justin looked away and smiled broadly. What about you? No call. I must have gotten the number wrong, he shrugged. I called, and there was some angry man. Good thing you told me where you work. And I caught you. Honestly, it was just luck. Even though I work around here. Even if I'd left with nothing, it wouldn't have been such a shame. Yeah, you're just in time, Emily said, smiling. I was just finishing up my business, and I was about to have coffee, and you were going to keep me company. I'd love to. Justin nodded. Then I have one request. Emily squinted at him. Anything you want. Let's not talk about work today. I have a vacation ahead of me, and frankly, I'm so very tired. That's no problem at all. And I have to work until the holidays. Then I have a week's vacation, and then I'm back in action. I just got back from vacation yesterday, and I'm right back at your place. Emily and Justin sat down in a cozy cafe and ordered drinks and desserts. It's frosty today, the guy came up to her arm. It's a stark contrast to Miami. It's a mild European winter there, not like us. It's all right. On the contrary, I like it. I love winter, the girl replied. Emily, I've noticed something different about you. You look different, kind of sad. Are you all right? You don't have to answer that. It's an inappropriate question, considering we're almost strangers. But what if there's something I can help you with? No, I'm fine, Emily smiled, but something in her smile betrayed a lie. Justin noticed it. Well, if you don't want to, don't tell me, he nodded. You know, the girl decided, I'll tell you. It is believed that it is sometimes useful to speak out, especially to a stranger, so that there was no prejudice to the situation. In general, a couple of days ago I packed my things and left my husband. Or rather, he kicked me out. Almost 5 years of marriage. He said he had another woman he loved and she was expecting a child with him. Well, I did not argue, quite calmly reacted and just left. Now I live with my grandfather. And you know, I even feel better in some ways. That's the way it is. Wow. Justin shook his head and looked at Emily. And you say it all so calmly. Women are usually hysterical in these situations. It wasn't all smooth sailing. I was living in an illusion. I just turned a blind eye to a lot of things. And when I left, I saw everything from the outside, and I suffered from my mother-in-law. My grandfather says everything's for the best, but I can hardly believe it. I don't know. I think I should rest now, spend more time with my grandfather. He's in a bad way. Heart failure. His blood pressure dropped a lot recently. He's a very good man. My grandfather's the only one I have. I lost my parents 10 years ago. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know, Justin said. That's okay. It was a long time ago. My grandfather basically raised me. He's an antiques dealer, and he instilled in me a taste for art. He lives all alone, with only a nurse to take care of him. Yes, Emily said. But it's good that he has you. There are so many lonely old people nowadays with no one to help them. No, I will never leave my grandfather, said Emily confidently. Tomorrow we'll go Christmas tree shopping with him. It's probably not very convenient to take a cab, but let me give you a ride, Justin suggested. It's my day off tomorrow, too, and I don't have much to do. It would be my pleasure. Besides, it's always nice to meet an interesting person. And your grandfather seems to be one of them, doesn't he? Oh yeah, Grandpa's a real piece of work. He always has 1,000 stories to tell. Am I boring you? Not at all, said the man. I'm easy to get along with people. I like to talk. Apparently the interlocutors feel it and willingly reach out to me. That's right. Emily laughed. I don't know you at all, and it feels like I've known you for 100 years. I couldn't even talk so freely with my husband, but I still don't feel comfortable asking you to come with us to get the tree. Where's it going? In the cabin. On the roof, only if you mess up the car. We usually get a huge tree. Don't you worry about that at all? I'm just trying to reassure Emily's boyfriend. I have a pickup truck. I can fit a Christmas tree in the back of it. Okay, Emily sighed. That's a deal. But I have a question. Go ahead. Are you sure this won't hurt your plans? You probably have a family, Justin. I'd rather spend time with them than with a woman I don't know and her grandfather. I don't have any family. I mean, I have my parents and my sister, but they live in other cities. My parents went south about 5 years ago, my sister to New York. I'm all alone out here. No girlfriend? Emily asked disappointedly, trying not to betray her feelings. Justin almost smiled. The cat is worse than any girl. She's very jealous and demanding. But I love her like that. I can't help it. Oh, a cat. Emily laughed, and I was already thinking. And what? Did you have to get married? Upset? You bet I was. Emily blushed. Why would you be? I don't know, he winked at her. You'll forgive me for being frank, but I think you really like me. I'm good at sensing these things. Emily turned red and looked down at him. No, Emily, no, you don't have to be embarrassed about it. I like you very much, too. From the very first time I met you, I was so sorry I didn't ask for your number, even though you wouldn't have given it to me. Married after all? I'm still married, Emily replied quietly. Considering how mean your husband was to you, you can't call it a marriage. Tell me you're not going to file for divorce. I will, Emily exhaled. Grandpa's in a hurry too, but I want to recover first. I'll do it after vacation. I can set you up with a very good lawyer. No, I don't think you'll need one. We have no property in common, no children. Why no children? Justin frowned. No, I'm sorry to be tactless, but in this situation it's a good thing we don't have any. It's just that there's a baby fever now. People have a baby almost immediately after marriage. You seem like a well-off girl. I'm sure your husband doesn't need either. Now that we're being honest with you, I'll tell it like it is. I can't have children. We wanted to have kids, but it didn't work out. Alex accepted it, but as soon as his mistress got pregnant, he ran away from me. My grandfather says that if fate has ordered it so, we should look for happiness in another direction. He's absolutely right. The main thing now is to find yourself. Once this happens, everything is within my reach, and a child can always be adopted. You can love it no less than your own. What if he's hereditary? You don't give up children for a good life. That's true. But I believe that upbringing and love are crucial. And heredity is something that can be changed. I wonder if I should go. I was very happy to talk to you, but my grandfather was waiting for me. I'll come tomorrow. Just tell me where and when. Can I give you a ride, by the way? I wouldn't mind, Emily answered playfully. Let's make it closer to 3 then. But we have to be there by 6. Grandpa's got homework at school. She didn't even notice how the holidays flew by. She'd grown close to Justin during that time. They went out a lot, talked a lot. At Christmas, her grandfather even invited the guy to visit. He liked Justin very much. Emily, her grandfather, asked her cheerfully as she did her makeup to get ready for the visit. Guest, because this guy is really good. He likes you, I can tell. And your eyes light up at the sight of him. Don't make it up, pouted her granddaughter. We're just friends. It's rare to meet such an interesting and kind person. Tell me they're still friends. Maybe it's true, but I'm not fooled. There's a spark between you two. Why don't you go ahead and get a divorce? I have a feeling Justin's going to propose to you soon. Where are you? We've only known each other a couple weeks. Justin took a good look at Emily. What kind of proposal? And he's a confirmed bachelor. A man is convinced that he doesn't need anyone until he meets a woman he's crazy about. And Justin, by all accounts, has met her. I proposed to my grandmother a month after I met her, he said. I didn't see any reason to wait. We liked each other. We had fun together. The love was such that I couldn't look at anyone else after she died. Grandfather, Emily said, indignantly, things were different in your day. Now we have to live together, get used to each other, understand each other. Without making stuff up. Lana, were you and Alex nagging? We were. What's the point? Everything's the same all the time. It's just the scenery changes. If people really love each other, they don't need to test their feelings. You'll feel it in your heart. You can't go wrong. You think so? Emily frowned. This is where it's supposed to shrink. Henry Johnson tapped his chest. I can feel it. Emily didn't have time to finish her sentence. Henry turned pale and started to fall. Grandpa. Emily cried out, frightened. What's wrong? Where are the pills? Henry slowly slid to the floor. Emily barely had time to pick him up. She dialed the ambulance and then called Justin. Justin, get over here as soon as you can. Grandpa's sick. He's all white. Did you call an ambulance? Just wait, don't worry, I'm right here. I'll be there in about 10 minutes. Emily frantically rubbed her grandfather's palms together. She found the pills in his breast pocket and put a couple under his tongue, as he usually did. It's all right, granddaughter, she murmured faintly. You're going to be all right. Henry fell silent and closed his eyes. The girl sobbed, clutching his hands. When the ambulance arrived, there was nothing that could be done. The paramedic registered the time of death. At the same moment, Justin walked into the apartment, realizing that something terrible had happened. He saw Emily sobbing, trying to push the doctors away from her grandfather, and took her into another room. Emily, he patted her cheeks. Just calm down. Now sit here. I'll do everything. At the funeral, Emily could hardly stand on her feet. Some people came up to her one by one to express their condolences, but she answered machine-like, not recognizing anyone around her. Only Justin's warm palm, clutching her own, somehow connected Emily to reality. Henry was buried in the same grave where his daughter and son-in-law had lain for 20 years. For a long time, Emily had been out of sorts, but Justin wasn't about to give her into the clutches of apathy so easily. Remembering her stories, the man almost immediately began taking her to the racetrack. The fresh, frosty air soaked with horse manure, the morning, the smells, and the horses quickly brought the girl to her senses. She even began to smile. The vacation was coming to an end, but Sarah Thompson, seeing how worried her assistant was in no hurry. She told Emily to come back when she felt better. Justin never left the girl's side. He was always telling her stories, cooking her meals. He practically moved into the apartment with her. Emily didn't mind. The guy even brought his cat. Usually reserved with strangers, British cat named Margot immediately fell in love with Emily. She slept at her feet, constantly asking for hands, which caused surprise of the owner. Wow, Justin laughed. This madam usually recognizes no one but me. Emily, what's your secret? I don't know, she shrugged, looking at the fluffy, black satin fur. I've never even had a cat. Only a parrot, apparently, feels my grief. By the way, cats are sensitive. Justin nodded. And I see your companionship is doing you good. You make a couple of sandwiches for yourself when you go to feed her. I noticed. Look, your cheeks are even bigger. So Margot, keep up the good work. We've got to get back on the road to life. The cat, as if understanding, began to purr louder than eagles and hypnotized Emily with her huge green eyes. Gradually, things got better. Emily went to work. The hectic activity was a good distraction from Justin's negative thoughts. She felt completely safe. This man was tapping into her soul, something that had previously been dormant, and soon Emily realized that she loved him for real. He finally came to live with her, as Emily refused to move in with him. Every little thing in the apartment was precious to her, and she couldn't let her grandfather's memory get dusty or worse, trampled on by the tenants or the new owners. It was 6 months later when Emily filed for divorce. She'd forgotten all about Alex, who hadn't even tried to remind her, but had to address the issue as Justin just walked up to her one morning. When the girl was making coffee, got down on one knee and handed her the ring. Emily couldn't believe her eyes. Of course she agreed, because now she couldn't imagine a day of her life without Justin. But the formalities had to be settled. At the same time, the girl entered the rights of inheritance. When the notary announced the will, the hairs on Emily's head stood up. She had no idea that her grandfather owned such a huge fortune. The will left her both apartments, the entire collection of valuables, and an astronomical amount of money from the bank account. It turned out that Henry had been saving money all his life, spending almost nothing on himself. In total shock, Emily walked out of the notary's office. Her fiancé was waiting for her in the car. Well, he smiled at the bride. I don't even know how to say it. Of course, I knew that my grandfather was quite a rich man, but to be so. Look at this. She handed the guy a folder, and I am now, it turns out, an enviable bride. Wow, the boy whistled, examining the papers. And what do you plan to do with such a fortune? I don't know, Emily shook her head. I don't need anything but an apartment, my grandfather's collection. I don't need that much. I could have enough for my grandchildren. I can't even have children. Don't rush things. Remember that you can always adopt a baby? I can't raise someone else's child. Justin. Emily sighed. I've thought about it, but then we could do something charitable. I think Henry Johnson would be very proud of you and would be glad that his capital would go to a good cause. Well, yes, Emily thought. Only I don't know anything about it. Oh, Emily, if you want to, you'll figure it out. It's not hard. That's true, too. 3 days later, the doorbell rang in the apartment. Emily was alone. Justin had left on business. That's strange, the girl thought. I'm not expecting anyone. I wonder who's there. She went to the door and looked through the peephole. Almost immediately, Emily recoiled, realizing who was standing on the other side. What do you want? She said in a chilling voice. Emily, please open the door. We need to talk, Alex answered. We have nothing to talk about, Emily grinned. The papers are filed. Divorce. I'll see you in court in a month. Emily, shouted her husband. This is very important. We won't take up much of your time. Emily thought she didn't want to see her husband and mother-in-law at all. She had no idea what they wanted to talk about, but she decided to open the door. Well, she began invitingly. What's so important? Aren't you going to let us in? Cynthia Lewis asked. No, I don't think so. Say what you want to say and go. Why are you so quick to chase us away? We're not strangers, after all, said Alex. You're wrong, dear, laughed the girl. We are strangers. Why did you come here? Emily, Alex began, eyes downcast, and we wanted to apologize. Yes, to apologize, repeated the mother-in-law. For what? Emily was surprised. We have all our issues resolved. There's nothing to talk about. It's over and done with. Emily, you don't understand. I want you to come back to me. What? The girl opened her mouth in surprise. What do you want me to do? You didn't get anything mixed up, did you? After what happened? What about your Nikki? I realized that I love only you. Emily, Alex reached out to her. Nikki was a mistake. I've rethought everything. I can't live without you. Please, I'm sorry. What about the baby? Emily faltered. That witch got another witch pregnant. Love interfered. She's been playing Alex for a fool. You know, you have to be like that. When the baby was born, I thought it was weird that he looked nothing like Alex. So I insisted on a genetic test. The paternity test was the eye-opener. Turns out Alex couldn't possibly have kids. And I kept blaming you. I'm sorry, Emily. Oh, that's it. Oh, okay, what does this have to do with me? Well, Alex was confused. And I realized how stupid I've been. I don't know how to make it up to you, but I'd do anything. We also heard that Henry Johnson passed away 6 months ago. Sorry it's late, but we're sorry for your loss. The mother-in-law spoke in a sugary sweet voice. It even seemed odd to be so involved. Her grandfather had never liked her mother-in-law, and Alex didn't like him much either. They constantly asked Emily to take money from him, but the girl did not even think about it. And then it hit her. It's a very strange coincidence that you're here right now. Grandfather's death had been known for a long time. He was a well-known man in town. You must have heard about it, but you've only come now. You could have at least called 6 months ago. Sly, with a squint. But I also know something else. The notary who read my grandfather's will to me is a good friend of yours. A family friend, you might say. I didn't realize. I bet he called you right away and told you that I had become the owner of a huge fortune. Isn't that right? Don't play games. I can see right through you. Are you mistaken? Cynthia was indignant. I can see in your eyes that I'm not mistaken. All of you, get out of here and forget about it. I have a new life now. You can live yours however you want. And Alex, don't make up any of this stuff. The inheritance is not our property, even though I received it while I was still married. That's the law. Now goodbye. Emily slammed the door shut with a bang. Her heart was pounding desperately. But the girl felt unusually relieved, and immediately a warm wave began to rise in her stomach. Emily didn't immediately realize she was nauseous, and she barely made it to the bathroom in time. What is it? Nervous from excitement, she thought. Their health has been blown away. They'll know how to hurt others. Grandfather was right. Their betrayal has boomeranged back on them. Who'd have thought it? They had the nerve to show up. I'm shocked at these people. Thank God the divorce won't take long, just a month. And freedom. Emily began to vomit again. This time the girl was terrified. This had never happened to her before. In addition, her breasts were hurting badly. The thoughts in her head raced through at breakneck speed. Alex can't have children. Even Cynthia Lewis was guilty of treating me like that, thinking I was infertile. Of a woman's days, I haven't had one in a long time. I thought it was all the nerves. And now I'm nauseous. What if? Emily dressed quickly, threw on her jacket, and ran outside. She rushed to the nearest drugstore and bought what she needed, then took a pregnancy test at home. The minutes of waiting dragged on endlessly. Finally, the test showed the result. First one bright pink line, followed by another, a little paler. Emily took the test with trembling hands and stared at it for a long time. Really, she said aloud. It's a mistake. But in her heart, she knew there was no mistake. All these years she had lived in the certainty that she could not have children. And the reason, it turns out, was not her. It was the doctors. They all said there was nothing to be done. And analyzers in front of her face waved that the probability of conception is 0. It was a lie, a terrible misunderstanding, a ridiculous mistake. No one had even bothered to check that something was wrong with Alex. Emily frantically grabbed the phone. Her hands were shaking and wouldn't listen. She calmed down and wanted to dial Justin, but changed her mind. She turned on the camera, took a picture of the test, and just sent it to her favorite person. She didn't wait for a response. She already knew everything would be fine. A widow with many children was weeping bitterly at her husband's grave, and as soon as her shoulder was touched. For 4 years, Joyce had not believed in happiness. Once she had everything a woman could wish for a loving husband, Albert. 3 wonderful children, a beautiful flat in the center, exotic trips once a year with the whole family to the end of the world, an expensive car. But everything changed dramatically when Albert died. The man was coming home late at night. A meeting had gone long. At work, he never particularly did not spare himself, realizing that a large family must be decently provided for. The job took up a lot of his time, but even with his busy schedule, he found days that he could devote to Joyce and the kids. That unfortunate night, Albert sat behind the wheel very tired. Their company was preparing for an important project, so the man hadn't slept much in the last few days. The road was empty, so at some point Albert relaxed and apparently lost his guard. He simply did not notice the impending danger. At the junction, a lorry slammed into him at full speed. There was no chance of survival. Looking at the traffic camera footage, Joyce realized that if Albert had slowed down for even a fraction of a second before the junction, the terrible tragedy would have been avoided. Inattention and fatigue were to blame, as well as the lorry driver who had arrogantly hoped to run through the junction on red. There's no point in blaming anyone now. Albert can't be brought back. It took Joyce a long time to accept what had happened when she received a call from the police. The woman was convinced that she had been the victim of a prank or fraudsters who swindled gullible relatives out of money by reporting trouble with family members, but something in the caller's tone alerted her. Senior Lieutenant Morris, as the man had introduced himself, was waiting for her at the district morgue. It took Joyce 10 minutes to get there, almost getting into an accident on the way. She entered the building on woozy legs. "This is crazy," the woman told herself. "This is a mistake. Albert's at work, he just got held up." And the fact that the phone was silent was just to keep her busy. Joyce, a man's voice called out to her. Turning round, Joyce saw a young boy standing in front of her. If he hadn't unfolded the law enforcement badge, she would never have believed he was an officer. Joyce, Senior Lieutenant Morris continued. "My name is Ethan. You and I have been chatting on the phone." Yes, Joyce responded uncertainly. "Where is he? Ethan, can I see him?" "Perhaps that's not the best idea," the young man replied, somehow embarrassed. "You see, the accident is terrible. There's hardly anything left of the car. And your husband. I've called you in now, rather to identify your personal belongings. I don't think it's wise to identify a body in your condition." Everything inside clenched. Joyce didn't understand how anyone could speak so callously about her husband. She still held out hope that someone else had died. There weren't many other Albertans in their big city. The policeman led the woman into a small room. Another young man sat at a desk, concentrating on typing something into his phone. Kyle Morris addressed him. "Get the evidence bag." Kyle lazily pulled open a desk drawer and extracted a clear plastic bag containing some red-stained items. "Here, Joyce, take a look at this." Ethan began laying the contents out on the table. "Do you recognize any of these items?" She was about to declare, without looking, that this was the first time she'd ever seen any of this. But then the gold pendant she'd given her husband on their wedding anniversary caught her eye. The woman reached for the shiny rectangle, but her legs gave out. Ethan managed to pull up a chair for her. Everything in front of Joyce's eyes swam. She drank the water offered by the policeman. "Yes, those are my husband's things," the woman spoke in a trembling voice. "We need to make our way to the station now, fill out paperwork, and watch the security footage." Morris addressed her. Joyce didn't care anymore. Her whole world had collapsed overnight. What did she care about paperwork? She had fallen into a kind of half-remembered oblivion and reacted to the words of the staff, clutching Albert's pendant tightly in her hand. All she cared about now was how to tell her children that their daddy was gone. After the funeral, Joyce had stopped caring about what was going on around her. The children were looked after by a nanny, and Joyce herself began to drink in secret. To the housekeeper's criticism of her constant pulling of bottles out of the bin, the woman did not react. She locked herself in her room and spent long hours looking at pictures of their once happy family. This went on for months. Waking up on a frosty winter morning with a severe headache, Joyce felt as if she had woken up. She looked around at the mess around her and cried. Only now did she finally realize that Albert would never again come into their bedroom, hug her, or call her to eat the cheesecakes he always made for the family on weekends. When the woman left the room, the first thing she did was head to the kitchen. Everyone in the house was still asleep. The clock showed only the beginning of 7. Joyce was determined to prepare her husband's specialty. Her relaxed body didn't obey her. It was only on the 3rd attempt that she managed to knead the dough. When the last cheesecake was transferred from the pan to the plate, Catherine came into the kitchen. Her eldest daughter was 8, but she was remarkably advanced for her age. "Mummy?" The little girl wondered. "Are you up already?" "Yes," Catherine, the woman, tried to smile and hugged her daughter tightly. "I wasn't feeling well, but I'm fine now." "You made Daddy's cheesecakes," Catherine wondered. Of all the children, she was the only one to realize that her father was gone. James, who was only 5, cried for a long time, but he couldn't understand what was happening. Elizabeth was just a baby, unable to comprehend such information. "Mummy, are we going to have things back to normal now?" Catherine asked hopefully. "Yes," Catherine. Joyce sighed heavily. "It won't be the same. But we're strong, aren't we? We'll try to manage somehow." Catherine sat looking at her mother with a confused look. The girl could hardly believe her words. The woman had lost a lot of weight. Always neat, stylish hair turned into some kind of crow's nest. Under the eyes, darkened horrible circles. Her hands were treacherously shaking. "You know what?" Joyce suddenly suggested. "Why don't we have a beauty day this morning? Just the two of us." They used to have this kind of entertainment regularly, having been the first in the family. Catherine had everything a little girl could want. Therefore, hearing her mother's proposal, the daughter, without hesitation, agreed. While they were talking, James and Elizabeth entered the kitchen, accompanied by Cassandra and the Harrison family's invariable nanny. His brother held the little girl's hand with care, leading her like a princess. "Mammy," the little one shouted with glee as they embraced her. They were used to seeing their mother in the kitchen in the mornings. Joyce rarely left the room, trying not to let the children notice her condition. "My good ones." Joyce smiled as she hugged the little ones. "Good morning, Cassandra." "Good morning. I see you're in a good mood today," Cassandra replied gently. There was relief in the woman's eyes. She had been worried about Joyce lately. She had been working for the family for 8 years now. In that time, she had grown accustomed to everyone as family. With Albert's death, everything had changed. But watching Joyce fade away was unbearable. Cassandra had moved in willingly to help out and take on some of the responsibilities of a hostess. "Aunt Cassandra," Catherine said to Nanny, "Mummy and I are having a beauty day today." "Oh, you don't say, my dear." "It's about time. It's better than being cooped up in 4 walls." After breakfast, Joyce and Catherine went on their beauty expedition, as they called their visit to the salon. Joyce was quickly tidied up and Catherine had her charming braids braided. However, there was a hitch at reception. "Ladies, the payment didn't go through," said the receptionist, smiling guiltily. "Let's try again. It happens sometimes." When the payment failed several more times, Joyce became seriously worried. Taking cash out of her purse, the woman paid. Getting into her car, she called the bank and reported her problem. Joyce, the employee, answered politely, "You see, the account to which your card is linked has been frozen. I can't give you the details over the phone. Come to the office." Joyce and Albert shared an account. The woman never gave much thought to how much money was in there, knowing her husband made a very good living. The message about the freeze left her confused. Of course, it's some kind of technical glitch, the woman convinced herself. Now I will go to the bank and find out everything. But the bank said nothing comforting. On the contrary, the situation seemed much worse. The account was arrested and blocked. Albert had some debts that Joyce had no idea about. They never had any secrets from each other, the manager said monotonously. Even if you inherit now, you can't unfreeze the account. By law, debts are inherited too. So what's left? Either sue, trying to recover the money, or accept it. Neither of which Joyce was happy with. Suddenly, fear came to her throat. What is this? The woman thought with horror. There's no money. What am I supposed to do now? Joyce had never worked, having been fortunate enough to marry a wealthy and promising man. A student, Joyce initially worked part-time as a translator, dreaming of a career as an international translator. But her husband was adamant. I am capable of providing for you so that you will not deny yourself anything for the rest of your life. Joyce never went to work, and then Catherine appeared, and the woman devoted herself entirely to her family. Joyce grinned. for the rest of her days. Who knew how things would turn out? Right now, the woman was concerned about the children. Of course, there was some cash at home, and the jewelry could be sold. Enough for the first time. But money was running out at supersonic speed. Used to living large, Joyce didn't know where her finances were going. At some point, she suddenly realized that she had run out of money altogether. The jewelry had been sold. The contents of her husband's safe were rapidly melting away. There was nothing to do, so she went to Cassandra for advice. Cassandra, the woman, began softly, stepping noiselessly into the kitchen, where the nanny was preparing something. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Joyce, why are you so frightened?" The lady standing at the cooker literally jumped up and down. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." Joyce tried to justify herself. "I've got something to talk to you about." "Yes," the nanny said, wiping her hands on her apron and sitting down at the table. Joyce didn't know where to begin. But there was no one closer than Cassandra right now. She was the only person Joyce could talk to normally. "Cassandra, I don't have any more money on me," she began. "What do you mean, Joyce?" And the woman looked at her understandingly. "What do you mean you don't have any?" "I always thought Albert was earning enough to give your grandchildren a good old age." He did. Joyce sighed, but he had some debts. Huge debts. "I've been to the bank and all the accounts are blocked. I've been spending the cash in the safe for 2 months now. I've sold most of my jewelry." "Joyce, are you serious now?" Cassandra exclaimed as if she couldn't believe it. "Why didn't you tell me before? It's not a minor problem. You have children." It was embarrassing. Joyce excused herself. "I've never been very good at counting money. It was Albert's job. He never let me in on things. Turns out money does run out. I don't know what to do now." "You have to get a job before it's too late," Nanny said firmly. "A job?" "I've never had a job," Joyce replied. "You know, I got married straight out of college. Albert wouldn't let me earn my own money." "Well, you have a good specialty," Cassandra said. "There's always a need for translators." Cassandra didn't give up. "Where would they take me? I graduated 10 years ago. No experience, nothing." Joyce disagreed. "It's okay," the nanny continued. "Work on the internet. I think translations are always in demand. Anyway, you never know without trying." "That's true," Joyce sighed. "Do you think it pays all right?" "It's all right. It's not all right. It's enough to live on. You'll have to tighten your belts, of course, but it's up to you, you know. I won't leave you in the lurch, but it's time you got things under control." "Hello, Martin." Joyce was visibly agitated as she dialed the number of her husband's friend and companion. "This is Joyce Harrison," she introduced herself. "Joyce, hello. Where have you been?" The man was very surprised. "I rang. You didn't answer the phone. I haven't seen you since the funeral." "Well, you know, I was in such a state I didn't want to see anyone." Joyce sighed heavily. "Martin, I need to talk to you. It's a serious problem. I think you can help me." "No problem," Martin answered in a confident tone, giving Joyce hope. Half an hour later, Martin was in the flat. It had been 6 months since he had visited his friends. Without Albert here, everything seemed somehow alien. The men had been friends since high school. They'd been through a lot. They opened their own business, shared both profits and losses. After the wedding, Albert was a little distant, but Martin did not take offense. He understood everything. He had no family of his own. His personal life was replaced by his favorite job. Joint business did not connect them for a long time. He accumulated capital. Albert went on a solo voyage, engaged in real estate, and Martin remained a small businessman. But doing what he loved, it didn't affect their friendship. "What happened to you?" the man asked. Martin, Joyce began. "Tell me, did you know anything about Albert's business?" "What do you mean?" "Well, I was at the solicitor's yesterday. I'm about to inherit the estate. It's been 6 months. I've got to make it official." Joyce suddenly stammered. And Martin didn't quite understand what she was getting at, or what it was about the inheritance. What's the next step? Isn't it a joy to get millions and not know where to put it? So she turned to an old friend for help. Joyce continued. "No," Joyce said in a tone that alerted Martin. You see, Albert had huge debts. He never said anything to me about it. So I was wondering if you knew anything. They showed me some papers, some loans, some private loans, some receipts. And now I've got to pay it all back, you know. What are you talking about? Martin was genuinely surprised. What debts? I always thought that you were doing very well. I was jealous, to be honest. So? It's a lot of money. Astronomical. I don't understand it myself. I thought he was making good money. I spoke to Jack, his assistant, well, he told me that Albert had been really looking to expand lately. He's probably got the money to do it. I just can't understand why he didn't do it on behalf of the company. I take it you're worried, Martin said, and how much is there to pay? A lot to pay out, Joyce sighed. They blocked all the accounts, but I'm still short. I think I'm going to have to sell the flat. Really? Martin was genuinely surprised. The sum seemed to be really impressive. In his estimation, the Harrison flat was worth a lot. Center, prestigious building, huge space, designer finishes. Joyce had told him how much he needed to pay off his debts. Martin even whistled in surprise. Tell me, will you help me with the deal? Joyce asked. I don't know anything about this sort of thing. I'm afraid of running into crooks and losing the price. No problem, Joyce said persuasively. Tell me, where are you going to live? Maybe a cheaper option. I realize you're used to luxury, but you don't have much choice now. As they say, it's not a matter of living large, it's a matter of living well. Of course, Martin, I've had to say goodbye to luxury, Joyce agreed. And it would be nice to have enough for a 2-bedroom in the suburbs. There are 4 of us, after all, but there's no need to consider a decent one. I understand, Martin nodded. I'll try to find suitable options. All right, I'll get started right away so it won't take too long. Let me take a picture of the flat. I've got a good realtor in the neighborhood. He won't let you down. Mammy James interjected, where's my room? This is where you and Catherine will live. Joyce opened the door to the tiny bedroom. We'll put the beds here, and there's a table and a wardrobe. No, I don't want to live with Catherine. She's mean and greedy. I want my room back. The little boy whimpered. Honey, we're going to live here now. Don't you love it? Look how green the yard is. You'll even have your own tree. By your own tree, Joyce meant a huge cherry tree, whose branches were literally breaking through the window of the future nursery. And Elizabeth? James persisted. Elizabeth will live with me. There's plenty of room for us. Trying to smile, Joyce answered her son. Catherine entered the room. The girl's face showed that she was not happy about her new home either. Mama, she began, tell me, are we poor now? What are you saying? Joyce tried to evade, though she knew it was useless to deceive her daughter. Well, Catherine looked at her seriously. The whole flat is smaller than our kitchen. And we drove an hour to get here. Why are we moving? Mummy, I'm not stupid. Just tell it like it is. Joyce took her daughter aside. She didn't want James to get hysterical when he caught some of the phrases. Daughter, she began, I don't want to deceive you. You're right, we don't have any more money. It's just the way things are. But now we have to learn to live again. I had to sell the flat. A lot of things will change. But the important thing is to stay together. Isn't it? Joyce looked hopefully at her daughter. The girl's mind was going through an intense process. She seemed to be relating what she had heard to everything that had happened lately. For a moment, her eyes lit up. Aunt Cassandra isn't coming back, is she? Catherine asked disappointedly. If we don't have any more money, we won't be able to pay her. Catherine, Joyce hastened to reassure her. Cassandra won't leave us. We're like family to her. It's just that we will see her less often because she will have to work somewhere else. But she'll be happy to come round at weekends, won't she? Who's going to look after Elizabeth and James then? Whilst at school, the girl asked. Well, I'm working at home for the time being, and then I'm thinking of putting them in kindergarten, her mother said with sincere faith in her voice. And you yourself are ready to move to a new school? Continued questioning Catherine. Mummy, I understand everything. I'm already quite big, she said in a serious tone. What does it matter where to study? I can think for myself. Sometimes Joyce was amazed at how mature her daughter was. They couldn't afford the old grammar school. Thank goodness they had managed to get the child into a neighborhood school, which was really quite good. But still it is a stress for the girl, accustomed to classmates and individual approach of teachers. And with kindergarten for the younger ones, it was necessary to solve something. It turned out that it was not enough just to bring the children. The queue was huge, and Joyce could not afford a private institution. The cost of attendance seemed exorbitant. And then there were the two children. Cassandra's services, of course, had to be dispensed with as well. The kind woman had agreed to help with the household chores, but Joyce felt she had no right to exploit her all the time. She managed to find some work, but translations from French were of little interest now. Everywhere there was a need for specialists in Asian languages, of which the former student had only a vague idea. Anything she could earn was gone in a flash. The money left after paying all Albert's debts was barely enough for a small flat in a residential area and a small reserve, which Joyce put aside for the last resort. There was still a car, but a woman with 3 children didn't want to deprive herself of mobility, although the maintenance of a premium car also cost a lot of money. Attempts to get an official job as an interpreter in an international company failed. Seeing a spectacular, well-dressed woman, job seekers managers willingly escorted her to their offices, but her lack of experience and 3 children immediately turned them against Joyce. After a few such interviews, she gave up trying. Such conversations hurt her ego. So, and remained, in his opinion, forced to work part-time casual translations of modern French authors. The editor was in no hurry to pile orders, so the cash flow in the family did not turn into a stormy river. 6 months after the move, Joyce realized that the money is catastrophically lacking. She still had to sell the car, exchanging it for a simpler car. The school Catherine went to, although it was not elite, still required huge expenses. They were constantly collecting money for repairs, for gifts for teachers, for something else. The last thing Joyce wanted was for her classmates and teachers to be prejudiced against Catherine because of her family's difficult financial situation, so she paid all the exorbitant fees. That's the way it is in all schools, Judy, an old friend who was one of the few people Joyce kept in touch with after her husband Albert's death, once said. The rest of her friends had evaporated as soon as they felt there were no benefits to be gained from their relationship with Albert. And the widow might ask the widow for a loan. No one was in any hurry to part with the money. Joyce was a proud person, but nobody cared much about that aspect. So she was left with her university friend Judy, Martin, and Cassandra. They supported the single mom as best they could. But in today's world, it's hard enough to stay afloat without a financial backstop. You know what, Joyce? Judy continued. I've got an acquaintance who's opening a private kindergarten with some experimental methods of education. Not many clients yet, as the prices aren't too steep. Maybe I could put in a good word with her about your kids. She is a person who understands, responsive, and in trouble will not abandon. I think we can negotiate a discount. You still have to find a job, no matter what. With the kids at home, it's out of the question. That's true, Joyce thought. But I doubt if I can afford even a small amount of money. Please leave that to me, said Judy. I'll arrange it. We'll make it all right. I can't help you with the job, unfortunately. You know I'm not very good at it myself. Just as Judy had said, the owner of the daycare center had come to an agreeable arrangement. Joyce was relieved to trust the children to this woman, who, as it turned out, lived nearby and even offered to bring them home. Joyce immediately started looking for a job, hoping for some prestigious, high-paying position. It didn't work out. First, she got a job as an administrator in a beauty parlor, but she couldn't work there for a month. The relationship with the owner, who for some reason immediately disliked the newcomer, did not work out. Joyce did not have any working specialty, although there were a lot of similar vacancies, and the salary was promised to be good. There were still options, which the woman was prevented from considering by her pride. But could a person with a higher education go as a cashier or food packer in a supermarket? Joyce tried delivery, so popular with the younger generation, but after a few orders brought to her old acquaintance, she gave up the idea. And it was costing a lot of money in petrol. Joyce, let's go to my office, as a manager Martin once suggested to her when he dropped in for tea. We've got a girl going on maternity leave. I wouldn't want to bring in someone from outside. It's not a difficult job. Of course, I can't offer you a huge salary, but a full social package. Weekends like normal people, free meals. Sure, I'll go, Joyce agreed without hesitation. That's how she joined Martin's firm. Things were not going well at the new place. No, the woman coped with her duties in full. But relations with her co-workers had been frayed from day one. All the women working for Martin were convinced that Joyce got her position because of the chief's favor. Some ladies were openly jealous of her striking appearance and were quick to invent another unflattering gossip about her private life. But Joyce paid no attention. All she was interested in was how to feed herself and her children. Besides, her job left her enough time to do translations. However, the woman had no weekends at all. Even joint walks with the kids remained only a dream. Thank God, Cassandra came to the rescue, helping to make ends meet. Joyce had learned to live without her husband. "Mummy," Catherine said from the doorway when she saw Joyce staring at her laptop. "I don't think you've forgotten, but I'll remind you. James turns 9 this Sunday, and we haven't even bought him a present yet." It's like Joyce woke up. "Are you serious? Sunday already? What's the date today?" "Oh, Mum, you're so funny," she marveled at her daughter. "Greetings to distant space travelers from Earthlings. On our planet, today is Tuesday, the 4th of September. The time is 1837. "I'm really confused about the days at work," Joyce confessed. "It's been a nightmare today, and I've got a translation due. I couldn't get round to it." Joyce seemed exhausted. In the 4 years she had spent as a widow, a lot had changed in her life. She still worked for Martin. She was no longer the office manager, but his personal assistant. Her salary was rising in line with inflation. Joyce still hadn't learned how to cope with the problem of being broke. Catherine had become a teenager with growing needs. James had already started 3rd grade, and Elizabeth would be starting school next year. Joyce worked hard to give her children everything they needed. But quality clothes and newfangled gadgets cost a lot, and the woman did not want her favorite offspring to stand out from their peers. Of course, Catherine constantly argued with her in the shop, choosing things simpler and cheaper. But Joyce couldn't be persuaded. "Let me finish early tomorrow," her mother continued. "You and I will go shopping and pick out something interesting. Do you know what he'd like?" "Oh, Mum, Joyce. Shame on you. You've forgotten all about us. You don't even know what your son is interested in." That's it, said Catherine. "I'm joking. I understand perfectly well. You're not a little girl, I know everything. I'll show you when we get there. We'll have to stop by the Albion shop." "All right, my daughter, whatever you say," gave up mother. "There should be enough money. I hope I've been saving." Catherine vanished out the door, leaving Joyce alone with her thoughts. 4th of September, the woman reflected. After all, the day after tomorrow will be 4 years since he's been gone. We'll at least have to go to the cemetery. Joyce went to her husband's grave once a year. She couldn't stand it any longer. To see his smiling face etched on the black granite slab. She couldn't. Immediately, a heavy wave of memories of the past came crashing down on the equally hard granite of the present. She had never taken the children with her. Only once Catherine had traveled with her, but seeing her daughter's tears was even more unbearable than her husband's stony smile. After leaving work early, Joyce took her usual route. Martin, having learnt where his assistant was going, offered to give her a lift. But it was important for Joyce to make the journey alone. There were no traffic jams yet, so she reached the cemetery quickly. On the way, she stopped at a flower shop and bought 4 snow-white roses tied with black satin ribbon. The shop assistant smiled sympathetically at her, adding even more tragedy to the situation. At the cemetery gate, Joyce did not see the typical picture of peddlers soliciting paper flowers. The beggars and cripples that usually sat along the paths were not present on a weekday. Only the sounds from the granite workshop and the few wreaths gathered near the entrance reminded her that this place still had something to do with the world of the living. Joyce walked with an uncertain gait, noting on the way the landmarks she remembered from her previous visits: the lush fence, the graves of some authority figure from the 90s, the sad angel mourning a 5-year-old girl who had left the world. A rubbish bin topped with a pile of colored funeral wreaths. Spotting a bifurcated birch tree, the woman turned onto the path on the right. "Here we go, just a little further and I'll be there," Joyce thought, sinking her heels into the soft ground. The birch trees were already beginning to turn yellow. Ahead could be seen a granite slab gleaming in the sun, casting a sort of sombre golden glow. 2 huge ravens sat on the table, eating something left over from an offering to the dead with gusto. There were plastic bottles lying everywhere, wilted flower heads, dry branches. Doesn't anyone really clean up around here, Joyce thought. Is it so hard to take the rubbish away with you? Well, here I am, she said in a shaky voice, squatting down in front of the ever-smiling Albert. I'm sorry I'm alone and haven't been here in a while, love. I brought flowers. I know you didn't like them much, but it's tradition. With those words, Joyce put the roses in a jar of water, putting aside the withered remains of the ones from last time. And the children are all grown up now. Catherine's a real bride. You wouldn't even recognize her. She looks just like you. The woman pulled out her phone and started flipping through pictures of the kids. James is 9 now. Yesterday I went with Catherine to pick out a present for him. You'd think your son was into aeromodeling. They got him a plane like that. Catherine said he'd jump through the ceiling when he saw it, and Elizabeth is a year away from school. She's smart. She's already reading and writing. I even do French with her sometimes. Joyce sighed heavily, wiping away her tears with the palm of her hand. She didn't know what else to say to a dead man. All this superstition had never appealed to her. Even as a child, going to the cemetery with her relatives, she hadn't understood these meaningless conversations with the earth, libations of vodka on the grave, greetings and farewells. Well, a man is gone, he's gone. What can be done about it? What does he care about the survivors now? How am I doing? Joyce said, answering her own question, supposedly asked by the silent interlocutor. Same old, same old. I'm working for Martin. I don't know where we'd be now if it weren't for him. I don't make a lot of money, of course, but it's enough to live on. Cassandra's been very supportive. She's retired and often takes the younger ones to her cottage. I took them all summer, teaching them to garden. Elizabeth couldn't get out of the berry patch. And James has learnt to swim. I'm thinking of enrolling him in the pool. He needs sport anyway, Joyce said. For about 15 minutes, she sat in complete silence, immersed in her memories. The birdsong put her in a sort of meditative state. Suddenly, this calm was broken by a crackling noise. Joyce gave a startled shudder and looked round. An old man was standing not far from her, looking at her hesitantly. I'm sorry to startle you, the elderly man addressed Joyce peacefully. You see, it's Thursday. There's nobody here. And I'm lost again. I'm so lucky to have met you. No, not at all, the woman replied. You didn't scare me at all. I was just thinking and didn't expect anyone else to be here. Can I help you? If it's not too much trouble, could you help me find my wife's grave? It's been so many years and I keep getting lost in these gravestones. It's like she doesn't want me to see her like this, the old man smiled embarrassedly. Yes, yes, of course, Joyce agreed, rising from the ground. Well, Albert, goodbye, I'll be off. I promise not to be discouraged. I'll give the children a hug. Joyce walked towards the old man, shaking off the hem of her cloak. She noticed he was holding a tiny bouquet of lavender. What a thing, she thought. I wonder where he found these flowers. And they don't look artificial. My name is Winston, the older man introduced himself. And I'm Joyce. Nice to meet you, Joyce, Winston said. I'm sorry we met in such a peculiar environment, the old man said apologetically. I see you're interested in my flowers. To be honest, yes, Joyce nodded. I didn't think you could find lavender in our town at this time of year. Even abroad, it's out of season. Are you interested? I am, Winston smiled. When my late wife and I went to Provence, we visited the lavender fields. The guide told us that these flowers are rarely found outside the country. They don't take root anywhere, that the climate is not suitable, or something else. So I was surprised it's just lavender. I grow them in my own greenhouse. All right, well, that's a bit of a mouthful, but what about lavender? My wife was very fond of lavender, Winston said. I didn't share that sentiment, but I can't come here empty-handed. I'd like to make her happy. Mary, he corrected himself. Oh yes, the old man was worried. Let's try to find the tombstone. I used to turn off at that stone bollard over there, but it's all changed in a year. It's weird. I can't find a white marble monument, not very tall, and there's a wrought iron bench next to it. Mary. Joyce looked around. She'd never taken much interest in who was buried next to her husband. A couple of rows to the right, she spotted several similarly described monuments and immediately headed for them. On the third try, she found the right grave. "Winston," she called out. "I think I found it. Come here." The old man wandered slowly between the rows of graves, trying not to stumble on the grassy paths that were slippery from the recent rain. "Hello, Mary," he said cheerfully, kneeling down on the ground. "Again, you didn't want me to come, and very wrongly. You're always thinking of yourself. You know what? I'll find him." Joyce was looking at the photograph on the monument. It was of an elderly but strikingly beautiful woman. There was something subtly oriental about her appearance, and her eyes were laughing, filled with childlike joy. Judging by the date on the plaque, the woman had died 10 years ago, and also on the 6th of September. As you can see, Joyce thought, that's quite a coincidence. I wonder what it was from. She wasn't very old. She must have been ill. Suddenly, the old man's voice broke the silence and interrupted her thoughts. He spoke in French. The last thing Joyce had expected to hear was French poetry. Not just any poetry, but an extract from a famous poem by Arthur Rimbaud, to whom she had dedicated her thesis. Rolling tides and in winter's cold. I ran, baffled as the mind of children and peninsulas, breaking away from the land, had not learnt the triumph of such wild passions. By itself, Joyce's translation of the stanza spoken by Winston succeeded. The old man froze, slowly turned his head in her direction, and looked with surprise at the woman for whom it had cost nothing not only to recognize a rare poem, but also to reproduce it in Russian. "Well, well," he said. "I see you like Rimbaud?" "You see," Joyce replied, sitting down on the bench. "When I was a student, I studied French, and this poem by Rimbaud was the subject of my thesis. I'm literally fascinated by this young poet, because he didn't have much else to write. And this poem left a significant mark on French poetry and literature in general. To say that I was surprised to hear it here now, and in excellent French, is an understatement." Yes, Winston laughed. There are coincidences in life. And how can you not believe that everything in the world happens for a reason? Joyce, that poem. Mary was literally obsessed with it. My wife had an excellent knowledge of French, and as a young woman, she was fond of translating the classics. Then one day she came across Rimbaud, and you realize how difficult it was to get hold of such literature, even for students. She read the translation, but it seemed to her that it did not convey the essence of the original, and Mary was a very persistent and determined girl. So she decided to create her own translation. I have an old notebook at home in which my wife wrote down her versions, but she was never able to perfect them, as she thought. "It would be very interesting to see it," Joyce said. "I touched on the subject of translation during the defense, but it was about the popular versions. I'm interested purely from a professional point of view." "If you're really interested, then you're welcome to visit," Winston replied. "I live alone. My son got married a long time ago and moved to the capital." "He visits once every couple of years," Winston continued. "I'm afraid to fly. I've never even seen my grandchildren in person. Mary's gone. I'm a recluse. My friends have all left this world long ago. If it's not too much trouble, come and see me. I live near the Central Library, you know. Maybe the house with the columns in the original?" I know, Joyce smiled. The old man's offer might have seemed dubious to some, but the woman felt that the man was very lonely, and the sincerity with which he told her the details of his life was endearing. Besides, Joyce really wanted to look at Rimbaud's translations. Her professional interest was making itself felt. "I'll definitely come. Let's do it tomorrow at 5 o'clock. It'll be convenient. I'll have a couple of hours to spare." Of course, assured her old man. "Come, I'll treat you to a specialty coffee. A woman's recipe. I'll leave you my phone number. If anything changes, let me know." The new acquaintances stayed at the cemetery for some time, and then Joyce kindly offered to give Winston a lift home. All the way he told her about the peculiarities of growing flowers in the greenhouse. Joyce had never realized it could be so interesting. She returned home in high spirits. Catherine had already come home from school. "We must eat quickly," Joyce said. Mother and daughter went to the kindergarten. Elizabeth managed to get into a fight with a boy who was pulling her braids. The conflict ended with a torn shirt. The child's angry mother demanded compensation from Joyce for the spoilt item. Unwilling to listen to an explanation, Joyce silently pulled out the money. Noticing that the purse was almost empty, she muttered, "Yes, it's still a couple of days before payday." She didn't scold Elizabeth, noting only, "A real lady would not defend her honor with her fists, but would seek revenge using her intelligence." "How's that, Mummy? I don't understand." "You and I will definitely talk about it, but a little later. But I'm still glad you didn't let yourself be offended." "Mum," Catherine intervened in the conversation, "why did you give that bitch the money? It's clear that it's her child's fault." "If you'd stayed out of it, you'd still be in one piece," Catherine said. "Sometimes you have to give in," said the mother. "I realize what a conflict would lead to now. We'd have a fight with her. She still won't admit that her son is at fault. After all, then I will question her love and methods of upbringing. And there's no way to prove anything to an offended soul. He'd end up attacking Alex again tomorrow, only with his mother's encouragement. And now we'll teach our princess how to take revenge on the offender without using fists, so that she won't bother again. And this, as you called her, bitch doesn't have enough brains to realize that her son was insulted." "Well, Mum," Catherine stretched out, laughed, "what a sly one you are." Having finished her work, Joyce remembered that she had promised to stop by Winston's. She called her eldest daughter and arranged for her to pick Elizabeth up from kindergarten, telling her that she would be a little late. Mum Catherine piped up, "Are you late for work, or are you going on a date?" "What date, baby?" Joyce laughed. "I've got an appointment. I'll try not to be long. Okay?" "All right," Catherine whispered, "don't worry." Joyce bought some cakes on the way. She didn't want to go to the house empty-handed. She knew a good bakery that sold inexpensive but delicious sweets. She liked to take her children there when she had free time for a joint day off. The woman parked in front of the impressive stuccoed front door, noting that the house where the old man lived did not look simple, even by modern standards. In the old days, representatives of the ruling elite, diplomats, academics, high-ranking officials lived in such Stalinist high-rises. But today, only very wealthy people could afford a flat in such an architectural object. Winston lived on the 7th, top floor. Joyce took a rare lift with a sliding cast-iron grille and noticed the rich decoration of the stairwell. The walls were decorated with moldings, the marble floors were clean, and each door had a gilded plaque with the initials of the owners. When she rang the bell at the door that said Winston lived behind it, the woman waited a long time for the door to be opened. Winston greeted her with a broad smile. The old man was dressed in an immaculately tailored gray woolen suit that made him look much younger. "Good evening, dear Joyce." The man greeted her. "I didn't expect you to come." "Why not?" the woman asked, embarrassed. "Well, you'd have to admit, meeting in a cemetery is a rather dubious way to start a relationship," the older man smiled. "Though, considering the way life flows nowadays, it's surprising that strangers can even talk to each other and find a common theme." "I confess," Joyce replied, "I am driven by professional interest, and I'd like to try your advertised coffee. I brought some cakes too." "Thank you." Winston took the bundle of treats. "Please come in." Joyce walked into the huge living room. The flat had high ceilings of at least 4 meters. One wall of the spacious room was completely filled with shelves of books. On the shelves were whole collections of rare editions, which the owner of the library had collected for decades. There were even some ancient-looking medieval manuscripts and editions with traces of time on their covers. Apparently, the owner of the flat was a man extremely well-read. The order of the bookshelves made it clear that the contents were not just decoration or an attempt to impress. "I see you like my little collection?" Winston asked, bringing trays of coffee and sweets into the room. "It's quite small," Joyce said, still looking at the books. "There are at least 2,000 volumes here. 3,047. To be exact," said the old man. "There were more, but when Mary died, I donated some of it to the university library, as she had willed. And now that I'm retired, I can't afford to read as much as I used to. My eyesight's not what it used to be. And you know, it was more interesting to discuss what I read with Mary than to be alone with my opinions. Sometimes I'd open her favorite illustrated editions and just admire the drawings. Here, for example, Winston reached for one of the shelves, where there was a whole collection of brightly colored covers decorated with golden Arabic ornaments. Winston displayed Tales of 1001 Nights, an amazingly beautiful full-size book covered in silk with a glossy marbled insert depicting a tent in a flowering garden. It's a 1913 French edition with illustrations, he said. Oh my God, it's beautiful. Joyce marveled. I'd never have realized that such copies were in private collections. It's a work of art. You're right, smiled the old man. Such collections can easily be sold at auctions for decent money. Today there are no more than 5 complete collections of such books, but I will not sell my fairy tales for any money. You see, they are not just well-preserved volumes, they are memories. Moments of happiness, forever gone, but also forever in my soul. Mary and I bought this collection in Paris, would you believe it, at a flea market, and for only 300 francs. Although at the time it seemed a fabulous sum to us. When Soviet citizens got to foreign countries, they bought everything that was different from their usual life. But for some reason, Mary and I did not go to fashionable shops and perfume shops, but went straight to hunting for antiques. The seller asked 400 francs for the books, but we had only 300 francs left. Seeing the fire in my wife's eyes, the merchant could not stand it and gave in. Probably then he regretted 1,000 times, because today the cost of such a collection is at least 30,000 euros. Oh, really? Joyce marveled. Is it really true? It's true, sighed the old man. So what good is money if you can't buy anything with it? Think about it. How can I, an old man, afford such a sum? It won't bring me joy. Shall I put it in the bank? What for? For a funeral, maybe. Because it's expensive. And it's expensive to send yourself to the next world for that kind of money. I'm not some pharaoh. Joyce laughed. Winston was right. She wondered what she would have done herself. If she owned such expensive books, she probably wouldn't hesitate to sell them. He's the one who doesn't need the money. Joyce has children to raise. Every penny counts. That kind of luxury is a thing of the past. What if the books belong to the children? Joyce wondered. Then, no, not at any price. It would be too low. She'd be better off scrubbing floors. She wouldn't sleep at night, but she wouldn't deny her family the right to such a treasure. Winston sipped his tea from a fine china cup. Oh, what lovely coffee! Joyce exclaimed. I've never tasted anything like it. I'm glad you appreciate my specialty recipe, laughed the old man, though it's not quite right to call it your own. I learned to make coffee this way from an old Arab named Amin. His coffee shop was located in one of the old neighborhoods. Arabs appreciate coffee. For them, it's not just a drink, but a whole culture. How interesting, Joyce exclaimed. Have you traveled a lot? A lot, Winston sighed. But Algeria is a special subject for Alice and me. You see, she was an interpreter at the embassy. She was sent to North Africa right after college. At that time, the Union was actively establishing relations with the Arab states. There weren't many specialists. That's where she and I met. And you're a translator too? Joyce was surprised. No, not at all, smiled the old man. I was an archaeologist. An archaeologist? Joyce marveled. Yes, I agree. It's not an ordinary profession, Winston replied. For a long time, our group had excavated all over the United States. My specialty is Orientalism. I lived in Uzbekistan for a long time. We found a lot of stuff there. But in the 70s, I received an unusual offer from my university to go to Algeria to excavate in Jamil. Of course, I agreed. It was practically impossible to go abroad at that time. I should not have refused such a chance. An interest, you can't deny it. But here we went to Africa. At first, of course, everything seemed wild, especially the unbearable heat and the absence of the usual amenities. We drove into the mountains. It was very hard to get there, and to be honest, it was scary. The very terrain and people were frightening, and our guide looked like a criminal. Jamil is an ancient Roman city. They began to study it in the early 20th century, so we were not pioneers. But we had to take into account that Algeria is not a developed country. No roads, no proper shops, and it's in the middle of nowhere. We had to carry all the luggage, provisions, and equipment on our backs. We had a few mules. I'm still amazed at how hardy they are. And Norman, the guide, even though he had a creepy appearance, turned out to be a reliable man. He saved us from many dangers. We were several months away from civilization, surrounded by ancient ruins. There were ghosts and creatures everywhere. But the scariest of all were the nights, or rather the cold that came with them. It's unbelievable when the temperature rises to +50 during the day and drops below 0 at night. In the mountains. Of course, it's a peculiar pleasure. But we were young and brave and obsessed with digging. "How did you and your wife meet?" Joyce asked. "And Mary?" Winston sighed. "Mary and I first met when our group was on its way home." The old man drew in more air, as if preparing to dive underwater. After a long pause, he began his story. The excavations at Jamil were a success. Winston's group managed to find the remains of thermal baths and well-preserved mosaic floors. They even managed to get hold of a few clay jugs, which were quite well preserved. Such a find was rare, so the archaeologists were already preparing to rest on their laurels of glory, having taken several hundred pictures, published dozens of articles in magazines, and carefully packed their equipment. The group intended to make the return journey in the morning. The last night began as usual. At first it was sharply cold. The guys built fires, cooked dinner, and sat down to tell stories. Life stories quickly became boring. Then the interpreter Norman began to pester Said to tell them something interesting about this place, something he had encountered himself. The guy did not agree for a long time, but after persistent persuasion and a couple of shots of vodka, his tongue was loosened. "I had just started taking scientists to the ruins," Said began. "My first group was 4 young Frenchmen," Said. "The War of Independence had just ended. The atmosphere here was not the most favorable, but I liked that these young people were free of prejudice and didn't hold their noses. There was a photographer among them. I think his name was Jean, though I could be wrong." They reached Jamil quickly. It was the beginning of September. It was not very hot during the day, so it was easy to walk. The boys set up camp at the site, and I went to harness the mules. "What's stopping us here?" Norman asked quickly. So it was decided to start the work in the morning. We were sitting by the fire, as we were now, and preparing to go to our tents. Suddenly, one of the guys noticed that Jean was gone. When the photographer left, no one noticed. At first, we thought he had gone to sleep in the tent. He didn't turn up. We went round the neighborhood, calling for him, trying to find him with torches, but no luck. The guy was gone without a trace. It's not hard to get lost here, but there's a risk of wandering into the mountains and falling into a crevasse. Sleep was out of the question. Every minute counted. We split into pairs and continued our search. Francois and I went into the mountains, and the other 2 lads went to explore the ruins. When dawn broke, my partner and I returned to camp. As we approached, Luke, one of the guys who had gone to the ruins, came running towards us. He was waving his arms and shouting at us to hurry up. We ran after him toward the amphitheater. There on the steps sat Eugene. His head was as white as chalk, though only yesterday he had been a burly brunette. He was frantically clutching his camera and muttering to himself the word Mopana. The guy seemed to be unable to see anyone or anything around him. His pupils were severely dilated and his lips were chapped. He did not respond to our words. We got him to the camp, gave him tea, and put him to bed. By morning he seemed to have regained consciousness, but he remembered nothing at all. Perhaps he had managed to photograph something, but I was not to find out. As soon as the guys left, I never heard from them again. Sam broke the silence around the fire. "You know, I went out of the tent last night to take a leak, and just in the area of the amphitheater I saw some kind of glow. I thought it looked like the moon was setting, even though it was overcast. What if it was haunted?" "That's a bit of a stretch," Sam said. "Norman, there's no such thing as ghosts." "Yeah, Winston, the leader of the group, said skeptically. He had always thought such stories were rubbish. He wasn't going to believe them, but he couldn't sleep well after what he'd heard. When all the boys had gone to their tents, Winston lay still for a long time, wondering what the Frenchman could have seen in the ruins that he had turned gray overnight. Suddenly, his musings were interrupted by a crackling noise from the street. He poked his head out of the tent, but it was empty. Only the embers of the fire were slowly going out. He was about to climb back in when the crackling sound came again. The sound was loud and distinct, coming from the direction of the ruins. But no Winston muttered, climbing out of the tent. Whatever it was, it didn't sound like it was coming from the other side of the world. The boy did not wake anyone, and, armed with a strong lantern and a stout stick, set off in the direction of the amphitheater. There was someone in the center of the structure. Winston froze, not understanding how a person could be here. The logical explanation was that it was someone from the camp, but the figure was dressed in something light-colored, covering almost the entire body. Winston gripped the stick tighter and aimed the beam of light at the man sitting below. "Hey, what are you doing here?" shouted the archaeologist. The figure didn't move. Oliver sank down a couple of steps and froze, sweating with fear. Had the boys decided to play a trick on him, knowing how he felt about all sorts of mysticism? "Norman," he shouted, "if they're trying to scare me, it won't work. I'm going to use this stick." Winston confidently ran down the steps and approached the figure, swinging the stick. Suddenly, the figure rose sharply and turned round. The lantern illuminated a woman's face covered in blood. Winston stepped back, paralyzed with fear. The woman stared at him in silence. "Who are you?" Winston spoke in plain English. "Do you need help? We have a first aid kit. I'll get it for you. Just don't go anywhere. Do you understand me? I'll be back." He was about to leave when suddenly the woman grabbed his arm and addressed him in clear Russian. "You're not a hallucination, you're real. Are you here alone? I didn't hope for help anymore. You see, our motorcade was attacked. We were on our way to Seattle, but we got trapped on the way. Some men pulled us out of our cars, started pushing us around, trying to get us into their truck. I managed to get away. You see, it's getting dark fast. I know the city's not far away, but I'm totally disorientated. I came across these ruins and decided to wait out the night. But it's very cold. If it wasn't for you, I think I'd have frozen to death by morning." Only now Winston noticed that the stranger was wearing a silk business suit that was stained and torn in places, and what he took for a blanket was a jumper and an Arab headscarf. "Lord, let's go to the camp," Oliver exclaimed, taking the woman under his arm. "Can you walk?" "I think so," she answered. "Only my heel seems to be broken." Winston helped her to the camp, lit a fire and sat her on a bench. From the tent he got 2 blankets and a first aid kit. Treating the wound on the stranger's face, the guy saw that she was still quite young, no more than 25 years old. "What is your name?" asked the archaeologist. "My name is Winston. I am an American archaeologist who by fate found himself in this wilderness." "And I'm Mary," the girl answered and even tried to smile. It was obvious that she was still frightened. "Mary Smith. I work at the American Embassy as an interpreter. We traveled from Algeria on a diplomatic mission to a local university. But as I said, we were attacked on the way." "God, what about Sebastian and the others?" She continued confusedly. "I'm the only one who escaped." The girl appeared greatly disturbed. Winston, too, was alerted to the fact that bandits might be lurking nearby. Of course, they had a few guns in the camp, but they could hardly serve as a good defense. "There's no point in worrying about that now," the archaeologist said hastily. "You can't help anyway. Tomorrow we will go down to the city. And there we will think what to do in this situation. Right now you should be glad that you were not captured by these bandits and did not die in the mountains." Norman's head emerged from the tent. Loud voices woke him up. The others also seemed to wake up. In a minute, the whole group was already sitting around the fire. They were surprised at the appearance of a woman in the camp, and a very beautiful one at that. Nobody fell asleep till morning. First, everyone listened to the story of the appearance of a stranger in the camp, and the remaining few hours were on duty. In the morning, the archaeologists loaded their loads onto mules and set off for town. Mary was placed on one of the pack animals, and Winston walked beside her, ready to support her at any moment. You know, if Syed hadn't told us that terrible story the night before Winston began, I'd be fast asleep. I'm afraid to imagine what would have happened to you." "What was the story?" Mary asked. "Was it about ghosts in Roman ruins?" "Exactly," laughed the boy. "I don't believe in all that, of course, but somewhere inside there's still hope that there's something left after death. And I believe that we don't go away forever," she said sadly. At the gendarmerie, Mary explained at length to an officer in mirror-polished shoes and white gloves. "What happened yesterday?" The officer called somewhere several times, making the girl languish in suspense. Winston never left her side. The rest of the guys had gone to a hotel to rest. He realized there was no way Mary could be left alone. After a couple of hours spent in the station, it was learnt that the diplomatic motorcade was attacked by a group of radicals opponents of the ruling party. At that time, relations between the United States and Algeria were developing very unfavorably. But there were those who were against it. The diplomats were taken prisoner and ransomed. Mary got through to the embassy and learnt that the negotiations had been successful and that her colleagues would soon be safe. The other end of the line was very happy to hear that the girl was all right. They offered to send a car for her, but Mary refused, preferring to get to the capital by train. Winston was very pleased with this option. It meant that for some time he would be able to continue his acquaintance with this amazing girl. After all, his group also had to take the train to get to the international airport. In the capital, Mary escorted Winston to his flight. Before boarding, they exchanged addresses and phone numbers. A year later, the girl returned to her homeland. By that time, between the young people, there were real feelings. And Winston, in order to please his beloved, even began to learn French. Mary was transferred to the consulate. She sometimes had to go to North Africa, but most of the time she spent in the United States. Winston tried to match his expeditions to his friends' business trips. So it turned out to spend more time together. 2 years later, lovers played a wedding. Winston did not dote on his girlfriend. The girl shared all his hobbies, charged love for her own, so the newlyweds always had something to talk about. Hot arguments caused a discussion of literature. Mary passionately collected books, and if Winston preferred history and architecture, she grabbed every volume of poetry. On their honeymoon, they managed to go not anywhere, but to France. For American citizens, such a trip was something from the category of fantasy. Not everyone could afford to see the Eiffel Tower, but Mary's job at a foreign consulate was a great advantage. She was offered to accompany a high-ranking official to an international forum. The event was to last 3 days, and Mary could stay in a foreign country for another week. And to her great joy, she was allowed to take one relative with her. While his wife attended social receptions, Winston wandered around Paris, took lots of photographs, and practiced his conversational French. A simple American was fascinated by this majestic city. Architectural delights struck his imagination, and people conquered by their hospitality. When Mary's official activities were over, the couple could finally enjoy all this splendor together. The young wife dragged Winston to flea markets, museums, and cozy coffee houses. And at night they took long walks along the Seine embankment and dreamed of the future, enjoying the present. A year later, the couple had a son, Alex. Mary was over the moon with happiness. She inherited from her grandfather a huge flat in the center, where the couple immediately moved. Winston was swamped with work. He was sent to Fort Worth, near which were large-scale excavations of ancient sites. For 5 years, he was home for a maximum of 2 months a year. Mary almost completely took over the upbringing of her son, but even such long absences could not spoil the relationship between the spouses. On those rare days when Winston was home, he tried to make up for the entire period of his absence. Mary and little Alex marveled at how Daddy had so much energy and ideas for things to do together. He organized large-scale excursions around the city, took them to the countryside, arranged some fantastic costume plays at home, and still as heatedly argued with his wife about literary preferences. Finally, his forced exile ended and Winston sighed calmly, except that it became uneasy outside the window. The country was about to undergo a change of power, which some awaited with excitement, others with fear. By 1985, Winston, who successfully defended his doctorate, has already led his own archaeological unit at the university. He rarely traveled to the field, swamped with paperwork. By that time, the man had not yet turned 40, so he was very frustrated by the lack of practical research. Mary continued to work at the consulate, where she returned after her maternity leave. She didn't even have to worry about a position. There were only a handful of specialists like her. And thanks to her natural charm, even conflicts between delegations could be resolved. Alex was already in the 3rd grade and proudly wore a bright red pioneer tie around his neck. Unlike his parents, the boy had an extraordinary passion for English. Mary did her best to send him to one of the most prestigious language schools. By the standards of society, their family was considered exemplary, intelligent, educated, beautiful. The neighbors were especially envious of the fact that the couple never quarreled. Quarrels simply did not fit in their heads. How could they quarrel, living soul to soul? But the couple paid absolutely no attention to what was going on around them. Even suddenly fallen on the country, hard times could not break their strong family. When what was considered an unshakable power began to fall apart, Winston lost his job. No one cared about the ruins of the past when the ruins of the present formed all around. The couple were lucky. Mary was offered a long-term business trip, this time to Canada. The woman agreed without delay, realizing what could happen in her native country in the coming years. The most painful part of the move was perceived by Alex. By that time, he was going through a difficult period of teenage maximalism. Especially, he was in love with his classmate and almost ran away on the eve of the flight. But Winston had a serious talk with his son, convincing him of the need for a temporary move. In Canada, the boy came in handy excellent knowledge of English. He quickly adapted to school and made new friends. Winston managed to get a job as a consultant at the Faculty of Archaeology at the University of Montreal. The couple returned to the States only in 2008, when the country was recovering from another crisis. Alex stayed in Canada, by then enrolled in college. For some reason, Mary was sure that her son would never return to the States. As it turned out, she was right. Alex finished college in Canada, then got a job in New York, married well, and only occasionally came to visit his parents. The couple returned to their luxurious flat, which had been rented for the past few years by a German diplomat. Mary was delighted to find that her favorite books had literally been dusted off. The life of husband and wife flowed again in the usual course. Winston found an interesting niche for himself, consulting and organizing private archaeological expeditions, the demand for which increased sharply by 2000. At home, he only had time to wonder where, and his wife by that time has already passed the 50-year milestone. So much energy. The woman left the civil service and took up tutoring. She liked teaching students French. Young people listened with interest to her stories about her amazing travels in French-speaking countries. And then a terrible thing happened. Mary had a stroke. She was completely paralyzed on the right side of her body. It happened on 6th September 2002. Winston was away at the time, learned about what happened on the phone, and immediately dropped everything to return to his beloved wife. After a long period of rehabilitation, the mobility of the limbs never returned. The disease has severely distorted her speech. All that mattered to Winston was that his wife was alive. But it seemed to Mary that such an existence could not be called life. Winston treated her like a child. He was increasingly annoyed with her. At some point, she was very distant, refused to accept his help, so it was necessary to hire a nurse. In rare moments, when Mary's mood improved, he went into her room and read her long Arabian fairy tales. The woman would cry. Winston was confused. He realized that he was completely helpless in this situation. He even tried to go to a psychologist to establish a relationship with his wife, but everything was to no avail. Mary did not want to be a burden, so she gradually faded away. This went on for 10 years. And then one morning, 6th September 2012, Winston, as usual, went into the bedroom of his wife to say good morning, but was horrified to find her dead. Mary had drifted off to sleep. Her face was calm and even somehow happy. After hearing of his mother's death, Alex returned. The funeral was lavish. Say goodbye to Mary came all her former colleagues, numerous friends. Winston, however, the death of his beloved undermined. The man withdrew into himself, stopped all contact with society. He was horrified to realize that together with Mary went that part of him that made him enjoy every day. His son begged the old man to go with him to the capital, but for Winston such a thing was unacceptable. He took an interest in floriculture, began to grow in indoor greenhouses, his late wife's favorite flowers, lavender. And every year he carried fragrant bouquets to her grave. The old man sighed heavily as he finished his story. Joyce could see that the memories were causing him unbearable pain. She's been gone 10 years now. But I hope every time I hear her voice again, he said. I know what it's like, Joyce replied. My story, though not as romantic, is that when my husband left, my world literally turned upside down. For 4 years now, I've been trying to cope with the loss, but I still can't get used to the fact that he's gone. Joyce Winston said to her, "Thank you for listening to the old man's story. You're the first person I've been able to talk to so easily in 10 years. And, I'm relieved." Winston, this date, the 6th of September, is a fateful date, Joyce said thoughtfully. Did you meet Mary on that day? She fell ill and died on the same date. My husband died on the 6th of September, and you and I met on the same date. Don't you find that odd? I don't know, my dear, said the old man. I don't believe in mysticism, but I can't help thinking that maybe there is a connection. Winston, Joyce suddenly suggested, come and visit us on Sunday. It's my son's birthday. I'd love for you to meet the children, Joyce said. She felt sorry for the lonely old man, trapped in this huge flat, alone with his memories of his wife. She liked him very much, so she thought it was appropriate to invite him to the family party. I don't know, Winston replied uncertainly. Would I be in the way? Not at all. Joyce was quick to reassure him. Of course not. You're such an interesting man. I think it would be nice for you and my children to get to know each other, and you and I have a lot to talk about. Honestly, I can't stand to see you lonely. Please come. All right, the old man laughed in reply. I will. From then on, Winston became a frequent visitor to the Joyce family's flat. The children immediately fell in love with the elegant and talkative grandfather, who had stories for every occasion. They listened for hours about his expeditions, traveling to other countries. Often Winston invited them to his house. Catherine was captivated by the old man's library. Together with Elizabeth, they read French fairy tales, looking at ancient engravings depicting the stories. Grandfather, otherwise they did not call Winston, spoilt the children with sweets, showed the outlandish things brought by him from foreign trips. Joyce was happy to have such a friend in the family. They chatted constantly with Winston over coffee, discussing everything that could come to mind. As a conversationalist, the old man was unrivaled. He literally knew everything about everything. Gradually, Joyce got rid of the heavy burden of the past. One weekend, Winston came to visit and immediately took Joyce aside. Joyce, he began. We've been in touch for a long time, and I'm amazed at how much my life has been enriched by having someone so close to me in it. I can see how hard it must be for you to raise these wonderful children alone. Tell me honestly, are you happy with your life? I don't understand you, Winston. Joyce replied with embarrassment. Of course I'm content. I have beautiful children, a roof over my head, and now I've got a friend like that. I can't complain, can I? That's a good answer, Joyce smiled the old man. But that's not what I mean, Winston continued. Let me get this straight. Do you have enough to live on? Joyce opened her mouth, not knowing what to say. They had never discussed material matters. Well, Winston knew that she worked as a manager in a small firm. She'd never disclosed her salary, but it wasn't hard to guess that it was barely enough to support such a large family. The flat was in treacherous need of repairs. The car was literally screaming for emergency assistance. But did it matter? Joyce Winston continued seriously. You may not say anything, but I'm not a fool. I can see this isn't easy for you. And frankly, it's a shame to see such a talented and versatile man wasting away in a hopeless job. That's why I have something to offer you. I've been talking to some of my old mates. Tell me, would you be interested in working in your specialty? What do you mean? Joyce was surprised. What do you mean? As a translator. Joyce, come on. There's a big company looking for a French translator. It's a prestigious job. It's a branch of a well-known French pharmaceutical company. Believe me, you'll be hired. I've already forgotten the language, Joyce mumbled embarrassedly. It's nothing, Winston hastened to reassure her. You speak perfectly well. You don't even have an accent. I know what I'm talking about. If you agree, come to the interview tomorrow. It's more of a formality, but you have to come and get acquainted. You can start work right away. Winston, she couldn't believe what she was hearing. If you're serious, of course I'll do it. What time tomorrow? Hang on, Joyce. Tomorrow's the 6th of September. Joyce was really enjoying her new job. She had to socialize with interesting people and regularly fly to France to accompany her boss. She had been in her position for 2.5 years. During this time, it turned out to be possible to establish a life. The children were transferred to a prestigious school. The eternal material problems fell away somehow by themselves. Even in her personal life, there was a shift. Joyce finally let Albert go, and one of her colleagues had a clear sympathy for her, which, to Joyce's surprise, turned out to be mutual on her part. One day her phone rang in the middle of the night, waking her from sleep. She did not immediately understand the meaning of what she heard. A familiar voice announced that Winston had passed away today. The old man had gone quietly, his heart stopping in his sleep. Joyce wept. Over the past few years, this elderly man had managed to become a true friend to her, even more a family man. But his passing had not caused hysteria. She was glad that at last this man would meet his beloved somewhere in heaven, where he stubbornly refused to believe with his mind, but recognized with his heart. Joyce helped with the funeral arrangements. Rummaging through the flat, she found a letter addressed to her, which Winston had apparently written shortly before his death. With trembling hands, she unsealed the envelope. Joyce pulled out a neatly written piece of paper. "My dear Joyce, I didn't want to upset you prematurely, but I feel like I don't have much time left. I'm glad that at the end of my days, life has turned color again. Both you and your children are a real miracle. I have tried to do my best to help you deal with whatever has been keeping you from breathing fully. I want that from now on you have everything so that nothing will prevent you from developing and loving life. So please accept my humble gift for James and Elizabeth, because I know that for yourself you will refuse. With sincere respect and love for you. Winston." Joyce ran her hands over the sheet, not understanding what Winston meant. She was both happy and sad to receive such a message from him after he had gone. Soon Joyce forgot about the letter and plunged headlong into the abyss of everyday life. What was her surprise when 6 months later she received a call from the notary inviting her to attend the reading of Winston's will. At the appointed hour, the 6th of September, the woman entered the office, where she was informed that the last will of the deceased was to bequeath his flat to James, Elizabeth and Catherine Jones, and the library stored in it their mother Joyce Harrison.